All right, everyone. Thank you, John. I know we're running you around. Thank you for your patience, everyone, as we get our technical difficulties mostly worked out. John, we appreciate you. I'm going to call this meeting of the Policy Committee, the Board Policy Committee for the Washoe County School District Board of Trustees to order. We're going to start with our roll call, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam President. President Taylor.
I'm here.
Vice President Nicolette. Here. I am here. Trustee Church.
Here.
Trustee Mayberry.
Here.
Trustee Rodriguez.
Here.
Trustee Smith.
Here.
We have a quorum, Madam President.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, everybody, for being here. Let's go ahead and jump right in. We know we have this meeting, and then the board meeting will follow. There will need to be 15 to 20 minutes of a break between the two so that they can switch around some things technology-wise. So just know that there'll be a little bit of a break during that time as well. All right, we're going to jump right into Agenda Item 2. Starting with Agenda Item 2.01, I see staff moving into position. Thank you. This is just approval of the minutes. Oh, this is not you guys. This approval of the minutes from the Board Policy Committee meeting on February 15th. So I'm looking for a motion, if that is the pleasure of the board, to approve these minutes from that meeting in February.
So moved.
Okay, moved by Vice President Nicolette, seconded by Trustee Smith. Seeing no discussion. Any public comment on this, Jeannie? None? Okay, thank you. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition? All right, the motion carries, and let the record show it is unanimous. Now we'll get to where staff has moved into position. Thank you. This is Agenda Item 2.02. Discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and or for the proposed revisions of Board Policy 5400, student attendance, specifically to update formatting and clarify language to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. And then again, as a reminder, once we get any item today that has preliminary approval, it will be forwarded to the first review at the full meeting of the Board of Trustees. If approved there, we'll go out for a period of public comment, which is usually 13 days. And then we'll come back to the Board of Trustees for either final approval or whatever action the board deems necessary. So we'll jump in. And Deputy Beiersdorf, and you have friends.
I do. Thank you, President Taylor, Superintendent McNeil, and trustees. Deborah Beiersdorf, Deputy Superintendent, here to present proposed changes to Policy 5400, student attendance, which sits under the Office of the Deputy Superintendent. And I'll have the folks to my right introduce themselves to you.
Good afternoon. My name is Rochelle Murillo. I'm the director of the Intervention Department.
Hi, I'm Doug Taylor. I'm the attendance coordinator for the school district.
Welcome to you both.
So Rochelle, Doug, and I have been working for quite a while on the revisions to this policy, along with our Office of School Leadership and also our Office of Accountability. So you know that as well. This policy defines and describes the process for ensuring good student attendance in our schools. For the most part, the changes that are coming to you today, proposed changes, have to do with updated formatting. Also, we've included a definition for chronically absent or chronic absenteeism that was not present in the policy before. The last revision for this policy was not too long ago. It was in August of 2020. And as I said, we've collaborated with other offices. It's a multifaceted approach, and when we work with our students and our schools and our parents around attendance. So those are the primary changes to the policy, and I'm going to turn it over to Rochelle just to speak to a few others, and then be happy to take questions or input or concerns.
Okay, so I'm going to have Doug go first. He's going to define chronic absenteeism for you, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do as a school district to intervene and support improved attendance.
All right, so mine will be fairly short. Chronic absenteeism is actually a federal definition, and we are required to report numbers of chronic absent students to the federal and state government every year. Chronic absenteeism basically just means that a student has missed 10% or more of their enrolled days in school, and that enrolled days is kind of the critical facet there, because we need to calculate the 10% based on the number of days they actually could have attended as opposed to the total number of school days. So that's defined clearly in the board policy for you.
Okay, so to Doug's point, what I would like to point out is chronic absenteeism is something that we look at and we try to take a preventative approach to. In the policy, you'll see that we're asking schools to look at data, to review data, and to provide interventions at a multi-tiered systems levels support so that we're encouraging attendance at all levels with all students. We know that chronic absenteeism is an issue because as students become chronically absent, research suggests that they get larger and larger academic gaps. And so it's harder for them to be successful when they are chronically absent. So we want to intervene early. We want to be preventative. We want to provide support and identify the barriers to attendance and then actively work with families to provide support and resources that may be needed as we move forward with families to improve attendance. You'll also see in here that this policy talks about the Student Attendance Advisory Committee. This is a subcommittee of the board. We meet quarterly, and we also have a variety of community members, juvenile services, a district attorney. We have Chief Trevino on that committee, and we regularly review our chronic absenteeism rates. We review the programs that we have in place in the school district, and we discuss how we work together as a community to continue to improve attendance.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, and that kind of does it for our presentation.
Okay, thanks to all of you. Before we get board comments, let's see, do we have any public comment on this, Jeannie?
There's no public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Nicolette?
Thank you. Absolutely. Absenteeism. Yeah, if you're not there, it's hard to do stuff. But I two things. The purpose, this is not a big deal. It's not a content thing. It's kind of a formatting thing. If we could have the purpose begin like, at least in my looking at, the majority of other board policies, this board of trustees, just kind of switch that around. That would be wonderful. It keeps it consistent. And then there's really nothing mentioned about unexcused absences. How does that fit into this?
So just to address the excused and unexcused, we actually don't have excused and unexcused absences in the Washoe County School District. The two types of absences that we have are called exempt and non-exempt. And an exempt absence is one for which we receive documentation from a medical, mental, or behavioral health professional stating that a student needs to be excluded or out of school for whatever reason due to that medical, mental, or behavioral issue. Every other absence that we have is a non-exempt, or we actually just say they're just absences. And they all count towards chronic absenteeism. Now, we do encourage parents, and we want parents and families to contact us when students are going to be out with an illness or with a domestic type of situation. But those still count as absences per the definition of absent and are counted towards chronic absenteeism.
That is interesting. Thank you. So, in essence, and maybe in a small way, that could skew the absentee numbers a bit, because if Diane becomes ill and moves into a home education setting, we have a name for that, how does that play into this?
Thank you, Trustee Vice President Nicolette, for the question. So I think maybe, are you thinking maybe a home hospital kind of situation? So that's a little different case where a student may be out for an extended, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, extended period of time, maybe due to a prolonged illness, for example. But maybe more short term, if a student is out for perhaps COVID-related situation or something like that, then the school does provide students with work. Teachers stay in contact with the students as well to make sure that they're staying up with their classwork. Does that help answer a little bit?
It absolutely does, and I wonder, do we need to add a reference to that in here, or is that elsewhere and it doesn't belong here?
So that is elsewhere, and it's in quite a detailed regulation that once we move through changes that might be approved to the policy, then our next step would be going back and updating that regulation as well. And that regulation is fairly I think it's about less than 2 years old now as well. So that's where we would find that. And that would be the detailed direction to schools about how to code, how to track attendance, work provided to the kids, et cetera.
Thank you.
Okay, comments on the, now, can we go back, before you move on from, can we go back to what you said on the purpose statement, so we can deal with that before we go on to other comments from trustees?
Absolutely, and because I can read your mind, President Taylor, I do have some wording.
Okay.
Okay.
So let me ask you, are you making this a motion at this point, or?
Is that how we would like to do it, one step at a time?
We're certainly going to go one step at a time.
Okay, then, I would like to make a motion related to the purpose in Board Policy 5400, student attendance, to read, this Board of Trustees policy is designed to keep students in school, provide them access to curriculum, describe guidelines set forth regarding student attendance in Washoe County School District, period. Regular class attendance by students contributes to the educational process, and it's necessary to satisfactorily complete the requirements of any class or subject.
Okay, so you, a little bit of a rearranging there a little
just
bit.
kind of flip it.
So let's see if council can. Sure, install it. We're undergoing a little bit of a tech upgrade here, so we're doing this on the fly. Oh. All right.
Isn't that interesting?
Okay.
Let me do this a different way. Give me one second.
Okay, and then that way we can see the motion, and then we'll be looking for a second if that's the pleasure of the board. And I see that we have two other. Trustee Church, your light was on, correct, sir?
Unrelated to this.
Okay, you're right. I'm just saying we have two others that we'll go to after that.
Okay. I'm just going to type it, so it's going to take a second.
Okay.
I don't know if cutting and pasting is going to work.
Okay.
So why don't we pause on this piece then, and we'll go to Trustee Mayberry, your light was on first, and then we'll go to Trustee Church, and we'll come back to this so we are utilizing our time. Trustee Mayberry?
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, I have I guess more of a comment and then a question. Just as a parent, I just always assumed that if my child was was absent because they had a medical appointment, and I always made the effort to call because I didn't want to get in trouble. But I just always assumed that would be an excuse absent. But it does count toward the federal requirement. Yeah, I'm not sure a lot of parents would know that. That's interesting.
Oh, thank you, Trustee Mary. We're fighting over that. Yeah. Yes, it's a big change, and it's a big change probably from when we were in school, or those of us that might have older children that went through school with excused and unexcused. So the statutes changed with that. So I'll let the team talk specifically to it. But it is an ongoing. I know this. It's an ongoing messaging and support from our schools with parents about those changes. So I'll turn it over to Rochelle.
And some of those changes happen when we the federal definition of chronic absenteeism that happened somewhere around 2018, and in the federal definition of chronic absenteeism, an absence is an absence, and so. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. A lot of times parents are unaware of that. We have tried, though, through our communications department to develop family plans and family information and gotten that out to families so that they're aware of how attendance is taken, what does that look like for their students, how long do they have to make up work when they come back from a medical absence. So we have a lot of information that we've developed over the last few years to give out to parents to help them understand what that looks like.
Okay, thank you. And then can you just walk the board, just generally, what are the steps that you take if there's a child that's a student who's chronically absent? I know there's a sort of a process where you even do house visits.
Yeah, there's several things, and it kind of depends on the reasons why students are absent. We try to identify the reasons for the absence and why students are chronically absent. It can be a variety of things, having a hard time with transportation, things occurring in the home. difficulties in academics, and so they're not feeling successful, and so they, are avoiding school. And so we try to identify that reason, and then we partner with the families together to put supports together for students and families. And that could be a variety of supports that we put together in partnership with our family resource centers, school staff, teachers, school counselors. It could mean that we adjust their schedules. It could mean that we provide tutoring. So it looks different for every student depending on the reasons behind the absences.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and get back to the motion? I believe council's made the recommended change on the, just is that consistent with your motion, Dr. Nicolette?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so if I'll direct my colleagues' attention to the screen. If you haven't read it, that's the motion on the floor to make those changes. And the motion does not have a second at this point because we wanted the motion to be clarified. Now it is clarified, so if it is, and this was really more about structure, correct?
Structure.
The consistent structure with the other policies in place. It didn't change the meaning in substantially at all. So if there is a desire to second the motion, and then we'll go ahead and vote on it if that's the desire of the board. Otherwise, the motion will die for lack of a second. Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor from Dr. Nicolette. You called that motion, right, Jeannie? Okay, seconded by Trustee Rodriguez. Questions, comments, or discussion, I should say, on this motion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? All right, the motion carries. Let the record show that that is unanimous. We're going to go on to Trustee Church.
Thank you. This is one of the areas that I really care a lot about, truancy, like we called it in the old days, in the old Spanky and our gang, black and white TV shows. What do we call our, I think I'm seeing on my research, attendance officer, is that what they're called? And isn't there another title like that's related? Or how does that, can you just explain to me what we have to deal with that?
Sure. So we, I think you're referencing re-engagement specialists. So we have attendance officers. We currently have 10 that are assigned to schools. So every school has an attendance officer assigned to them now. And then we have 6 re-engagement specialists, and they help find students that have left our district and invite them back to the district to help them re-enroll again and provide support that way.
And basically the attendance officers do home visits, et cetera?
They do. They can be part of the attendance team at a school. They help to identify students that are chronically absent. They can do home visits. They can do transports. They support our student attendance review board hearings. So they do a variety of things.
Okay, and then most of that, I guess, is found in the regulation. Most of the direction on how that is accomplished.
Yes, and how schools can connect with those folks, working with Rochelle and Doug's department, et cetera. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful. I think if anything, if we had the funding, we need more. I mean, obviously, this is a big priority. What was our absenteeism? Do we have any figures for this year? I know COVID, we were like over 51%. Updated figures.
I think we're going to have, if I may, I think we're sliding a little bit off of the attendance policy, but I do know there's going to be some information to come forward when we start talking about transportation and the impact of absences during there that might get you there. But I want to make sure we stay within the scope of this. Not that that's a bad question, because that's good information to have.
Okay, and then my final comment is just probably wouldn't be appropriate in the policy, more it's a matter of the regulation, but I love to see the parents of absentee kids when it's like truant, when they're actually, just not love the idea of everything but forcing the parent to sit in a kid. I think that's a wonderful idea to, make that available to them. But thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Church and Trustee Mayberry and Vice President Nicolette. I didn't think all of you will. Clerk Minetto?
Thank you, Madam President. I know that 10% is approximately 18 days, right? How does that fit into cutting class? I mean, is it just,
So at the secondary level, which would be primarily where we're looking at that, absenteeism is calculated on a per period basis. And so they look at the total number of periods that a student has missed, and then a certain number of periods coincides with a day, which then gets us to the 10% or under, we hope.
Prorated. It's prorated. Other discussion on this policy, and if not, looking for a motion, if that's the pleasure of the board, to give this preliminary approval, which means it will move it forward to a full meeting of the Board of Trustees. Okay, there's a motion on the floor to move this policy forward as changed. Is there a second? Motion by Clerk Manetto, seconded by Trustee Rodriguez. Further discussion? All in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition? Okay, the motion carries. Let the record show it is unanimous. Thank you very much. Very important role in our schools. Okay, oh, excuse me. We're going to move on now to agenda item 2.03, which is, discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 5600, Student Wellness, specifically to remove references to the dissolved Student Wellness Committee and update formatting, clarify language, and reflect current practices to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees. And before us, we'll just go right to our CEO, Mr. Etchart, and then you have guests with you as well.
Thank you very much. Pete Etchart, Chief Operating Officer, and I am joined today by Shirley Kukowski, our Director of Nutrition Services, and also Bristy Zimmerman, who's kind of a jack of all trades, who's our registered dietitian, our menu planner, and also our student wellness coordinator is addressing this policy. And with that, I'm going to turn this back over to Shirley.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
All right. So today we are presenting before the board policy 5600, the student wellness, with some minor changes from, I think, the last time it was presented, May 26, 2020. The changes have been advised by the legal team and really mainly include reformatting as well, removing some redundancies and deletion of unnecessary language. So I really didn't have a lot more to say on this, but I do know that we'll ensure that following that, the administrative regulation associated aligns with those revisions as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we, have comments here, we'll go. Do we have any public comment, Jeannie?
No.
Okay, none on this one. I want to get your name right.
Shirley Kukowski.
Yeah, Shirley was the easy part. Ms. Kukowski. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Just so, because it seemed in reading this that there were no substantive changes.
Correct.
Primarily removing redundant language that was unnecessary, and then corrections and formatting. So, is there anything else you would want to draw our attention to on this specifically?
Not at this time.
Okay. Thank you very much. Look to the board for comments, questions, or a motion, if that's your pleasure. Dr. Nicolette?
Thank you. Welcome. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
I noticed a formatting challenge or discrepancy in the document. If we could scroll to page 3. Okay, keep going. Yep. There, right here. And then there's no heading. And then if you continue to...
Can you say where on 3? I'm sorry, Dr. Nicolette. Mine came up a little different on the...
Yeah, see, there's just a... It's a... Do you see what I'm saying here? How there's no heading
Above paragraph 7?
on that page.
Oh, right here.
As far as board wellness
You mean like a
policy?
Oh, there's no header.
No header. Thank you.
So that's not okay. I understand. Yeah. That isn't necessarily formatting it. That's just it didn't translate well in Word. So.
Okay. All right. Okay.
That'll be cleaned up.
All right. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. I noticed those little tiny things.
Yeah, thank you.
Call me anal. So I wonder, and I don't know if it belongs here, but and it's not a criticism. It's an observation because we cannot control everything. But in here, when it talks about nutrition, and it let me go to my page where it talks about school food and nutrition.
Can you direct us so we can follow you, Dr. Nicholas?
Well, you could go to page 2, section 6. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like I'm kind of out on a limb here and I'm bringing up something, but I do have a concern about it, and I don't know if it belongs here or not, but food waste. Mm-hmm. And I just wonder if if it could belong in this policy, maybe not with student wellness, but I think we all know that it is a challenge for a variety of reasons. And if we could possibly insert it into a policy, that maybe it's something we could more actively address. I know that there are federal guidelines that we must pay attention to and abide by. Having said that, I'm wondering if we have a component in our policy that indicates we are very aware of this situation, that it might be something we could actively pursue in the future. It's just a thought because I've seen quite a bit of it, and it worries me. And I've had emails from students, and it worries them too, which I think is really wonderful. So I guess my voice is really for those students that have shared with me that concern.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate those comments. You know, one thing I can definitely say on waste is we do try to be as proactive as possible in the purchasing and planning and processing preparation process, just to avoid waste to begin with, and in the recipes and everything. So we do try to keep that in mind, and we do have obviously hope that in the long term we have better of a sustainability vision as well for the district.
If I can jump in, Mr. Etchart, would you, because it seems as though I'm going to agree with you, Dr. Nicolette, and it probably doesn't go with wellness, because it isn't really wellness related, but it isn't to say that it might not be another place. If that's, I think I kind of look to you, Mr. Etchart, not that you know the policies off the top of your head, which I'm not sure why you wouldn't. No, I'm kidding. But perhaps there may be another place, because it doesn't seem to be consistent with wellness, but I certainly understand your concern.
Pete Etchart, Chief Operating Officer, and I take your comments, and I agree with you. And I think it's been an issue since I've been here, and I know we get the pictures sometimes from people saying, "Look at all this waste." And I agree with you. There's federal policies we have to abide by, and everyone has to take a certain amount of food, even if we know they're not going to eat it. They have to take it to count as a full meal. But we want to have things that help with that. And I will look at the board policies. We'll take a look and see where the best place for that would be, whether it's in the administrative regulation for this or if it's in a different board policy. We'll take a look at that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
That addressed that concern, Dr. Nicolette, kind of, okay. Thank you. Superintendent?
Thank you very much, President Taylor. You may want to key in on under our titles for the admin reg, look under meal consumption. That may be one that we want to take a look at, that if it's not in there, we can maybe couch it within the reg around there for meal consumption. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
That might be a good fit. I think the whole intention, Dr. Nicolette, correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's known that, so at least we know we're paying attention to it, and it isn't something that's lost, so to speak, on the importance. Other comments? Thank you, Dr. Nicolette and staff. Other comments on this? If not, looking for a motion, if that's the pleasure of the board. Okay, got a motion by Trustee Rodriguez, second. Second by Trustee Mayberry. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Opposition? Okay, the motion carries. Let the record show it is unanimous. Thanks to all of you. Ms. Kukowski, welcome. Thank you for having you here in front, and we appreciate your being here. Okay, on to agenda item 2.04. Discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 6171.1, Alternative Education Program, specifically to update formatting and clarify language to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. And our lead area superintendent, Ms. Lauren Ford, is before us.
Hello. Thanks for having me. For Board Policy 6171, we did formatting. We added to the purpose statement, we added definitions, and we added to the policy section. This policy has not been updated since 1992. One of the things that probably has changed in that time frame is that we are required by the state of Nevada to submit an alternative education plan that we submit each year. It is monitored by the Department of Education, and we do get a report on that monitoring. It's monitored with our distance learning plan. They're kind of together, and we get that monitoring feedback each year. So if you look very carefully at number 3, That is directly part of our plan that we have to submit. It's NRS 388.537, where we have to describe target groups of students that we will target for the alternative education within our policy and our plan. So these edits were based upon that plan that we submit to the state that are required elements. We have now indicated those within this policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we go to Trustee Church, just before we hit there, let's see if we have any public comment.
No public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. Trustee Church?
Hey, looks good to me, with one exception that caught my mind right off the bat. All through there and at the beginning of the policy, it says students at risk of dropping out of school. Then when I read down, many of these students are not really at risk of dropping out of school. They just have special needs. I don't know the correct word, but they're not really at risk. They're health issues. I mean, there's a whole list there. Do you concur with the way you've got it written, or should we maybe think about saying students at risk of dropping out or with specific needs, something like that?
So within the definition, well, I guess within the documents we submit, students who are credit deficient are at risk of dropping out. When we have we have a risk indicator. These are factors within that risk indicator. Those risks lead to dropping out. And so when we're targeting students, if they're severely credit deficient, getting them into an alternative education plan right away so that they can graduate, that's our ultimate goal, sometimes on time, sometimes not. That would be our goal, for example.
Absolutely, except I just don't buy into saying these kids are absolutely at risk. The student might go, I'm credit deficient, but I'm here, every day, I had a problem, I just moved here, whatever it is. Behavior disorder, yeah, I've got issues, but I'm here, I'm not at risk of dropping out. Wanting to accelerate their education is one of them, number 3C. Mm-hmm. That doesn't seem to be at risk of dropping out. A pregnant teenager or mother might be, yeah, okay, they're pregnant, but they're still showing up every day. I just like to see a sentence. I mean, again, this isn't the kind of thing I'm going to fall on my sword over. I just welcome input from my fellow trustees or from you.
Council wants to chime in on this one, so let's see.
And I understand Trustee Church's point. And it could be removed from the purpose statement, and I don't know if it would be that material. I will say, however, that NRS 388.537, subparagraph 1 specifically says that a school district may, I'm paraphrasing now, I'm not paraphrasing, quoting, operate an alternative program for the education of pupils at risk of dropping out of school. So it is in the statute that way. So I imagine that's where Ms. Ford took the language from, borrowed the language.
Correct, sir.
Before we go, I want to stay in here before we go on to another, unless you want to jump in on this one. Yes? Okay, please, Trustee Smith.
Trustee Church, I definitely see where you're coming from, because we wouldn't want to tell these groups that because you are any of these things, you are definitely going to drop out. I'm sure, so I'm going to make an assumption, but I need you to verify this. I'm willing to bet that we have metrics that these discrete groups have associated outcomes of increased dropping out of school, which is why they have been identified. It does not mean that this is a predestined outcome. So we know that students who are credit deficient are not absolutely going to drop out of school, but I'm willing to bet that we have metrics that show that these groups do have outcomes which are higher than average for dropping out of school. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay.
I'm going to jump in.
But I see where you're going with that.
Yeah, I want to say a couple things. One is the superintendent was going to say what you just said. And that was one of my suspicion. But I certainly understand that we don't want anything to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that because someone becomes pregnant, or because they want to accelerate, or because they have medical issues, it means they are going to drop out. But I would venture to say, and certainly we have metrics that you are at higher risk of it than your student who doesn't have that same challenge.
Thank you.
And that's how it was in my head. I said all that in here. So anyway, yes, Trustee Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam President. In here is maybe 3C, but or no, not 3C, sorry, go back up. 3B, would that include students that might have legal obstacles?
Correct.
Is that, okay.
Correct.
And in here, would there be for students that might be victims of trafficking or being groomed, things like that? What category would that fall under on here?
Well, it would probably fall under G, where students who have problems with drug, alcohol, mental health, or behavioral needs, if they're trafficking, they're going to have mental health needs.
Okay.
And they may choose to choose an alternate program.
Okay. What's that?
Could we maybe add abuse?
I think that, go ahead.
You already have it in H
Okay.
as students
Thank you.
who need flexibility to do a special circumstance. But be careful about getting too in the weeds on specificity. Let the superintendent do that through regulation.
All right, just want to make sure they're covered. Thank you.
No, I think that's important because those are students we want to make sure that aren't excluded. But I like the special circumstance because it doesn't define it. Because there may be something this time 5 years ago, trafficking would not have even been a consideration, but we know it's a very large consideration now, so it allows that flexibility being said in that way. Trustee Smith, I saw you, then I'll go over to Dr. Nicolette, then back to Trustee Church.
Thank you. And this is the item I originally had put my light on. So just a suggestion that I wanted to get your feedback on, Ms. Ford, for 3E, it says pregnant teens, teenage mothers. Would we be open to expanding that to teenage fathers as well, too? I do know of situations where teenage fathers in the district have had their own education impacted by looking to fulfill the obligations of that fatherhood.
Kendra, are you good with adding fathers?
That would be fine. We can add the teenage father.
Okay. Sorry.
I think that's a good catch.
Yeah.
Might
Or
I
it could
sug-
be. It could say that again.
Might
Trustee
I
Church?
suggest instead of mothers or fathers, parents?
Yeah. That's good.
Okay, so if we're on there, then we'll need to take a motion just on this piece. I know there are other lights, but we do motions as we go. So that verbiage, let me challenge my colleague Trustee Church, just because I like to do this sometimes when you're making the motion. What would that verbiage look like?
You do like that.
Just
this time I'm prepared.
Yeah, I just like to encourage you to get used to doing it.
Simply
that's
remove
all.
the term mothers and insert the word parents.
So in other words, just pregnant,
Teens, teenage parents.
pregnant teens, teenage parents. Okay. All right. So there's a motion on the floor that by Trustee Church that 3E is changed as stated, and there's a second.
Yes,
From
definitely
Trustee
a
Smith.
second.
No discussion on that. All right. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Opposition? All right. No, that was good because you came up with the verbiage, so that was good. That's good. Okay, then I said Dr. Nicolette, and then back to you, Trustee Church.
I feel like I'm getting in the weeds a little bit, so excuse me, but it feels like there's just a tiny gap in the follow-through of the teacher responsibility. The list about parent responsibility, I believe, is spot on. Ultimately, in the beginning and the end of the day, it's the parent, the family, whatever the dynamics, responsibility. On page 2, under number 2, B, teachers should create an effective mechanism or system to communicate homework assignments.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure where.
What am I doing? Did I just embarrass myself? Yes.
I'm not going to call anybody out in the audience, but somebody did this. Like, yep, you did.
I apologize.
No names, no names.
For wasting your time. Please
okay.
excuse me.
It's all right, but hang on to that because we'll be right back to it. Trustee Church?
We've all done it or will do it.
No question.
And unfortunately, I don't think we can edit that out, but I'm still a little bit troubled. Let's go with 3I and 3C. Students wishing to accelerate or graduate early. So, for example, they want to attend those courses up at UNR or TMCC. Would that fall into that definition of alternative education?
That falls under dual credit.
So what would be examples of those?
So if a student wants to accelerate and we use our program of Edgenuity and they take classes faster than the semester time frame. So they would take three courses, math courses in a semester as opposed to one. We wouldn't do that, but just as an example. So they could accelerate through that program.
I'm guessing there's probably a limit. You can't take too much.
Right.
So again, it gets back, I still believe, I'm going to make a motion and let it die or let it go. I make a motion that under policy provisions, definition 1, that where it states education of students at risk of dropping out of school, that the following be added. And more students with additional.
That's what, when you say it, which is a policy.
Good point. How about special educational goals?
That would still fall in IEP goals and objectives.
That I'm not sure. Would it be? I know we want to stay away from the general special ed population.
Maybe the words, but you can see my point. Those are students who are no way at risk.
I don't know if that's the case.
They're doing excellent. They're like, hey, I want to get to college early. I want to go to Stanford, and I'm going to try and get out at the halfway point.
Why don't we ask this? Our students, how about, because I think this is where you're getting, let's find out what our data says. Our students who wish to graduate early or wishing to accelerate their education, would we consider those students at risk of finishing?
Yes, if we don't provide them the avenues to do so quickly. If they can't graduate quickly, they want to get done earlier, they could drop out. Indicator.
So they're students, because I think you're thinking is that they aren't really at risk, and that's why I was asking the parents. Trustee, for that lend some clarity. That helped me, but Trustee Church.
Well, again, it's when I went to high school, I was one of those that tried to graduate early, but for one class, it had to be a semester class. I would have graduated at the 11.5 cycle. No way was I going to drop out. I was just anxious to pursue my, college or whatever. So I just see that as painting everybody with the same brush. And again, I don't think I'm getting any. I don't think there's a lot of support for that, so I'm okay with it. But I just don't want to paint that accelerated student or students that have other needs, but they're still showing up.
What if we said this, Trustee Church? Let me try to help you before. What if we said, I'm on definitions number 1, go down to the second line of that, education of students who may be at risk of dropping out of school.
That's certainly an improvement. By the way, it would also have to go under purpose because we use the at-risk twice.
Okay, but I'm trying to allow for that because I think if, in my mind, of course, every single student who fall into these are not going to be at risk and drop out. This is not supposed to be exhaustive. I don't believe, but I'm trying to get to where you are. Otherwise, we're going to move on. So I'm trying to get to where we are. I'm trying to reach you. But anyway, that's something you want to consider. You can certainly make a motion if you like.
No, I'll just withdraw the other motion.
Okay. All right. Any other comments on this one? Okay. All right. Looking for a motion to approve the policy as amended. Trustee Rodriguez, is there a second? Seconded by Trustee by Clerk Manetto. Discussion. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Opposition?
Nay.
All right, the motion carries. Let the record show it is 6-1.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Nicolette.
I really did my homework. I was just ahead of it.
You're just anxious. You just couldn't wait to get there.
Yes.
Just couldn't wait to get there. Agenda item 2.05, discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and or for the proposed revisions of Board Policy 6154, homework, specifically to update formatting and clarify language to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. I'll turn it over to Dr. Troy Parks, and he can introduce who's with him.
Thank you, President Taylor. And yes, today I have with me Jenny Anderson. She is currently our Director of Distance and Blended Learning, but she is she is transitioning to our elementary Director of Curriculum and Instruction next year. and you all have previously met our Director of Secondary Curriculum and Instruction, Kendra Fox. She is our resident expert on these policies, so I feel very comfortable with the two of them by my side. So for homework, yes, if you did your homework, you'll see that it is very much a site-based decision. This was last updated in 2018. Updates include the formatting. Definitions were moved to the front. No real content changes other than on page 2 we had E and F stricken as they're not enforceable in the policy. And we are open for your questions, recommendations, suggestions that you might have.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Parks. We'll go to Jeannie. Any public comment on this one?
There's no public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. Trustee Smith, I see your light, but we already heard from Dr. Nicolette on this, so we're going to go to her first.
Exactly. Very good.
Could you please repeat the board policy number that we are referencing? 6154.
6154. We're
right.
Yes,
All
that is
right.
what's before us, Dr. Nicolette.
I got to add a little silly with the embarrassment. So to say it again, there seems to be an element missing, just a tiny reference to the full circle of the teacher assigning to then the teacher following through to correct, to review, to provide input, respond to the homework. That's just that tiny little element that I'd like to complete that loop if it's possible. I'll tell you, to be honest, union goes through my mind, a whole bunch of things go through my mind, and as Dr. Parks mentioned, it's a site-based decision, but it seems to me that the importance of homework is not only the assignment, not only the family involvement, but then the expert, the teacher following through.
If I may, I see you're going to jump in. I'm going to just, so we can try to see if there's going to be a recommended change. Dr. Nicolette, would you mind looking at page 2E that has been stricken, that Dr. Parks drew our attention to? Does that capture what you're intending, or?
Page 2.
A microphone, yes.
I would say no.
Okay. All right, then please go. And then for that, we'll certainly hear from Ms. Fox, but then we're going to be looking for, as always, language. What does that look? Where would you want it to, you guys know how we do. Okay, please, Ms. Fox.
Thank you. Kendra Fox for the record. I would have you look at the regulation for homework. On the regulation for homework under grading, it says timely and appropriate feedback should be provided. Research shows that specific feedback is the most effective. For example, comments can include next steps for growth and should be linked to learning, the learning objective. Feedback can also be in the form of class discussions or peer conversations. So that's in the regulation. Is that the kind of thing you were looking for to be in the policy?
Exactly, and I don't think it needs to be that in depth, just to kind of close the loop. But yes, that truly outlines it. I guess just for me as a trustee in policy, I want to see that active participation with families, parents, and that closing the loop with teachers, the expert, if it makes sense.
So I could suggest that on that one that you mentioned earlier, on page 2, I think it's with the striking out, it's hard to tell, but I think it's 2B, where it says teachers should create an effective mechanism or system to communicate homework assignments, if appropriate and applicable, blah, blah, blah. And then we could add a sentence in there that says or a statement in there somewhere that says and provide feedback to students.
You read my mind. That's exactly where I would put it.
Okay.
Okay, so is that in the form of a motion then, Dr. Nicolette?
Absolutely.
Wait, we get, look, the superintendent, you wanted to weigh in?
Yes, thank you very much, President Taylor. So could we move to page 3? I just want to highlight this because maybe it's just within the formatting that we could work on. So if you take a look at page 3 where it talks about what the administrative regulations are, we could absolutely bullet, because it's called out there, the responsibility of teachers and administrators.
I'm sorry,
As
will you
far-
tell us where we are?
D,
D.
the board hereby directs the superintendent to adopt administrative
Mhm.
regulation to implement and maintain the purpose of this board policy.
Mhm.
And then it says the responsibility of teachers, which is around the feedback loop, administrators, grading procedures, average homework times, and protocols for assigning homework over extended break. I just wanted to highlight that particular section.
And thank you, yes. And for me personally, I mean, I don't want to make this too complicated because I think the admin reg really is where the meat lies. This is the 30,000-foot view. I just would like to see it, and I think Ms. Fox really pointed out a good spot for it. Teachers should create and maybe follow through with an effective mechanism. Keep it very simple because, as you noted in the admin reg, that's really where the meat is. But again, I'm not terribly.
Well, let's do this, if I may, as you kind of I see a couple of the mics, lights on. Would you like to comment on this issue, or are we going another direction? Another direction?
Another direction.
Okay, so we need to close the loop on this one, Dr. Nicolette, if it's, so give some thought to whether or not you want to make a motion on this, and we can certainly do that. Okay, Trustee Smith and then Trustee Rodriguez.
Thank you, President Taylor. I have 3 areas that I wanted to bring up. The first is under policy number 1, so that main one, and it reads, the decision to implement a site-based homework policy is designated to the school principal. I wanted to suggest and get my colleagues' thoughts on adding an additional sentence here. What I have written, but open to suggestion, is the board does not mandate the implementation of homework. Where I'm going with that is that I see that it is appropriate, and I fully support that principals make that decision about homework. I would like to take it a step further and do provide clarification that strengthens that site-based discretion of the principal, because I do know that there is confusion, having been a parent in the district now for 6 years. Even though we have this policy here, I do believe that a secondary line like that would create a further reinforcement about this decision being something we support homework, hence the whole policy, but the board does not mandate it. So I offer that to my colleagues. That's the first one.
Okay, let's have a conversation around it. Trustee Rodriguez?
I would weigh in. I think this is something I do believe there's going to be some change here, because I know there's plenty of blended families out there. It's 2022, and I know, seen, and understand the frustration why one sibling's at this school on the other side of town doesn't have homework, but this sibling does. And whatever the child custody arrangement might be, week on, week off, I know personally I've experienced that frustration with my own children. So to a certain degree, I support site-based management, but this is one where it's not fair. I don't feel it's fair for students, especially some families that are blended where, as I said, this student has homework, but this one doesn't. Same grade, but different,
So it sounds as though, if I may, just for clarity, so what you're recommending is a change that said that is a change where the board does prescribe everyone will have homework, or the board says everyone won't. Is that? I just want to be clear on what you're.
Pretty much. I mean, I think the homework should be uniformity across the district from Incline to Gerlach. It should be the same. If one student's getting homework, they should all be treated equally in this case. So.
Okay, let's continue the conversation. Trustee Church, did you want to weigh in on this issue?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm just confused. First of all, going back to the policy that Trustee Smith mentioned, site-based, I'm confused. Does that mean what they take home or what they do after school, or what does site-based mean?
You want to describe what site-based means? Any staff?
Sure. So within the policy, it allows at the site, with the leadership of the principal, and highly likely that you would have a site-based leadership team helping make the decision. Some of our schools have moved away from any type of homework expectations. If you look at the research behind homework, especially with some of our student populations, it doesn't show a lot of really good results in causing the frustration, people families who don't have homes, people are students who might be going to after-school care for long periods of time. So based on the site, they can decide that as a team, usually with the responsibility of the principal.
So my other question, does that conflict with what Dr. McNeil had previously mentioned at the bottom, that it's her responsibility to develop regulations? In other words, this says we give it to the principal, and then at the end we give it to the superintendent. Can we clarify that?
Let's hear from the superintendent.
Thank you, President Taylor. So it's really the difference between the definition of site-based, which you all actually have a policy, and we've already reviewed that policy. So site-based is just a term that we use to talk about particular governance in a school, right? So that you have a site-based leadership team, as far as Dr. Parks was speaking about. And they make a variety of decisions, right? It could be about homework. It could be about duty. It could be about supervision before and after school, bus duty, those types of things. The regulations are the details on the how. So this is the what of the board policy, and then the regulations go into the details on the how. So how is the superintendent going to carry out the board policy as far as what are those details in the regulation? And so part of that regulation would be, depending on the site-based leadership of our principals, they would then be able to decide if there is a homework policy within their school and what that would look like.
Did that answer that question?
I think so, but I think I'm hearing, so let me read it back. And if the site-based team says, we're not going to do homework, or we don't want to do homework, the superintendent could not override them.
Well, based upon the board policy, that would be correct, because the board policy says that's for the principal and their school community, or the teachers, whatever deal. So based upon that, the superintendent can't say, "Oh yes, you will."
I'm comfortable if everybody else is.
Okay,
I just wanted to clarify.
No, good questions. Clarity is important.
And I'm wondering, if I may, I'm wondering if, Kendra, because there is a lot of history with this policy. This is not a new policy, and there is a lot of history, a lot of background with this policy. And so I'm wondering, just for the edification of the trustees, I'm wondering if that would help kind of go into what the input was around this, the policy. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd be happy to answer that. I also, it might help if you look at the regulation also. It talks about administrators at the site developing their own homework guidelines. So as part of the regulation, it gives them help on how to do that. Back in 2018, we made one small change to this homework policy, and that was to make it a site-based decision. Because in the past, it said that homework will be assigned and homework will be given, but what was actually happening in practice across the district is that sites were deciding, based on their own population, what was best for their children, whether homework was given or not. And so that's why that change was made to the board policy back in 2018, was to reflect what was actually happening. But back in 14.
14 is what the one
we were tasked in curriculum instruction to pretty much do a complete rewrite of the policy, but it turned into more of the regulation rewrite. We looked at research, we looked at other districts' policies and procedures, and tried to come up with something that would reflect best practices for our students. So we put things into place like time, that homework should be time bound. So by grade level, in the regulation, it talks about at kindergarten, it shouldn't be more than 15 minutes per night. And then it goes up to high school, where it's around 2 to 3 hours across all of the subject areas. So things like that. It doesn't usually turn into that, but that would be like a max. It also talked about grading. So this might address what you were talking about, Trustee Rodriguez, is that at the elementary level, homework should not be included as part of the student responsibility category of grading. And then it proceeds from there into the high school, where it's actually, in most cases, part of the grade. So we tried to really put some parameters in place, but still giving teachers and schools the ability to do what they needed to do to serve their own population of students.
Okay, let's do, your light came on when we were talking about the site-based, and want to make sure we continue where we are with your light came on, then Trustee Smith came on, then Trustee Rodriguez, I know you have a totally different question. Yes, trying to keep up with all this. Ooh, and then Trustee Mayberry chimes in. Okay. Trustee.
Thank you, Madam
Trustee
President.
Manetto.
I was just going to ask if there's a law that says we have to have homework, because I am not a fan of homework at all. And although I think if they don't finish the work in class, then it's homework. But that's just what I think. Thank you.
There is no law about homework.
All right, sounds good. We go Trustee Smith and then Trustee Mayberry, because we're holding you till we get to something new.
Thank you, President Taylor.
Yes.
I love this conversation, and I'm very grateful to Trustee Rodriguez, because in bringing that up, you're actually going further along the same path I was actually on, because even within the people we know, kids in the same grades, different schools, even within a school, some teachers have homework, some teachers don't. So what I'm wondering is that this feels like a larger conversation than the policy, and I'm going to look to my superintendent here. I am very interested in being more aware of what data and research is showing us in terms of homework at different levels, elementary, middle, high school. I don't know that we could make maybe we could make a decision right here and now, but I would very much like to more fully explore, do we want to pursue definitive direction on homework at the elementary level, middle, high school? Is that something that we would agendize as more of a robust conversation and then have them come back with recommendations about how we evolve that as a practice, and that would be separate than this policy, or whatever comes out of that next agendized item would then direct like a revision of the policy?
One thing I would say, and probably because I was here, we had a real deep conversation about that in 2018, and I think that's what Ms. Fox was talking about. The regulations came from there, because that conversation did happen. Because then we start getting into the how. I think the conversation that happened at that time at the board level was the shift, so to speak, from homework being mandatory, everyone's going to give homework, to that's now a site-based decision, which we should probably be saying that we ask the superintendent to implement a site-based, really, because we can't really tell the sites what to do anyway. But that's neither here nor there. But so I think the board may want to say, hey, you know what? At some point we want to look back at that again. But that's what prompted us here in 2018 in the beginning. From that information.
And that's exactly what I'm getting at. Like, as Dr. Parks just mentioned, research is showing that maybe homework isn't entirely helpful. And by the way, I'm going to give you a little sneak peek. That brings me to 1D, which was my second thing. And that was homework should not create inequity or otherwise cause a disadvantage to students' learning. That was going to be a question, because I was like, I am not sure that that's actually happening. So to go back to what we're talking about here with this policy and what Dr. Parks said, I think I would be interested in having a larger conversation and revisiting that conversation from 2018 based on the research we have now. I understand that we're not doing that in this moment for this policy, but would that larger conversation be something that we agendize for a formal board meeting in the future?
I think it could be.
Well, and to kind of chime in 2018, I mean, obviously that was before COVID. Things have changed. We're trying to recover. I know we're all trying to move forward, and we have all this money trying to catch up. And if there's some principals out there that are, okay, on top of trying to catch up, here's homework. So, I mean, 2018, I understand that the board went in a certain direction, but that was also, you got a brand new board just about, so, and new times. So I would, too, love to discuss this further. And, I mean, I think it's interesting that there's no law that says better to have homework, and as far as site-based goes, I'm not supportive of that. So I think it should be uniform. But I'm there with Trustee Smith. I love to push this back or revisit this later, because we could have half-a-day conversation on this.
Well, understand this. It's already site-based, right? Just so you know. So
I'm aware.
So regardless of what we decide to do in terms of this, it still stays site-based until that piece.
Correct. So I think
unless the board today says, you know what, we can change this today, right? And the board today could say, we no longer want it to be a site-based decision. We don't want there to be homework, or we no longer want it to be a site-based decision, whatever the case may be, right? So know that piece. While we stay here, though, I want to make sure Trustee Mayberry is still waiting to chime in on. We're still on this, right? Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, I mean, we'd be the best board ever if we said no homework. I mean, 'cause but I think, generally speaking, I mean, I just want to weigh in, too. I appreciate where Trustee Smith and Rodriguez are coming from. I mean, I generally support the notion of site-based homework based. I mean, this is a large school district. It's urban in some areas, suburban in others, rural in others. So, I mean, every student has their own needs. There's different social economic parameters, I think, that need to be taken into consideration. I'd like to learn more, too. I'm a little trepidation moving forward with something when there's research out there on homework. So I'd be interested to hear a little bit more, too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. On this topic, so before we move further, so this topic, Trustee Smith?
Yes, so I appreciate this dialogue and would very much signal to anyone following along that it would be a great agendized conversation for the regular Board of Trustees meeting. I do still believe that I would like to move forward with my suggestion with the motion to add on to that one sentence. So for now, we would be maintaining the policy as it is, but I would like to add that second sentence. That is, the board does not mandate the implementation of homework, which adds a secondary layer of emphasis. So I will still
Would you like to make a motion to that effect?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor that that sentence be added under policy to number 1. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, so we'll go with Trustee Church, seconded. Okay, now discussion. Dr. Nicolette, you want to weigh in on this issue? It's written.
That's totally fine.
Okay, Dr. Nicolette?
On
On
this particular issue, as far as not mandate homework, I don't need to make a comment.
Okay, all right, thank you. Any other comments on the motion that's on the floor? Trustee Rodriguez, you're leaning in and out.
I'm thinking, I know. Obviously, the board does not mandate homework, but that doesn't mean like we don't. Never mind. I answered my question.
Okay. Comments on this, Trustee Mayberry?
Well, I was just going to say, thank you. Isn't this implied, though, that the board doesn't?
It is, but go ahead, go back to Trustee Smith.
It is implied, but I can tell you firsthand that there is an overarching belief or perhaps misunderstanding that the board endorses, or there is an obligation or a pressure. I'm not saying that exists, but a secondary line like this draws a very clear line that we can point to that says the board does not mandate homework. It is implied, but I can tell you from experience, there is a misunderstanding of the gray area there.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other commentary on adding that line as indicated on the screen? Okay. Seeing none. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Opposition? Right, the motion carries. That the record show it is unanimous. That was your first one, Trustee Smith. What is your second one?
Thank you. Well, the second one is less so of a suggestion, but a question, and that goes down to D, which I had mentioned before, the new D. Homework should not create inequity or otherwise cause it. I support this, but my question, subject matter experts, is this really, is this really happening, that there is a degree of about going on at home, and that it's not to the detriment if their homework's not getting done because maybe they don't have parents at home or older siblings who are tasked to watch them can't help. I like this, but I wonder if this is, what degree of confidence do we have that this is happening?
With as many teachers as we have in the district, I can't give you a percentage, but I can say that we advertise and out the regulation about the time and the time that homework should be. If a student, especially in the younger grades, is and it's been 30 minutes, the suggestion is to just stop go talk to the teacher the next day. I can say what has been communicated, but I can't speak to Max said it.
That's fair enough.
Thank you. I will say this. Let's hear from Madam Superintendent, and then we'll go further.
Thank you very much, President Taylor. And I feel very confident, Trustee Smith. You know, our administrators and our teachers do a very good job as far as understanding the needs of their families and their students. And so if we have a child, you know, we have some families who don't have a homework space, right? And we have other families that may be doubled or even tripled up right now. And so finding a quiet space for that homework time. But I feel very confident in the fact that our teachers take great pains, as well as our counselors and our social workers too, that's where some of those wraparound services can also be provided too.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. I have to admit, when we first talked about homework, I mean, I'm old school, right? I went to school 100 years ago, and we just had homework. It's just, and so it's a shift for me, but I had to be informed about the research and the impact. It's a shift for me in my own mind that, oh, what do you mean we aren't mandating homework? What do you mean? I mean, because that was my own experience, but I guess similar to what Trustee Rodriguez said, times change, things change, and you move along. So that's a shift for me. I understand, I get it, and I think the research is pretty clear and it's pretty solid when you put everything in balance. That there are ways that students can get the academic development that they need, because that's the end of the day. It's really about the academic outcomes, and homework doesn't play the role in it that we thought it once did. Eye opener for me, just sharing. Okay.
I am good on number 2 unless Trustee Rodriguez wants to talk further about that.
On 1D, Trustee Rodriguez?
Yes, and it kind of goes back to our first discussion. Like, I know there's families out there where kids are in after-school care until 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, and they get picked up, they go home, they got to focus on dinner, and then they got homework on top of that, and they got to be in bed by 8:30 so they get a full night's sleep. So I'm just really wondering if this is really happening, or that's the intent, because I know it's happening in our district. I just want to bring that to everyone's attention.
So again, just continue the efforts, right, so that the expectation is known. And I think as we have a deeper conversation about this as a board, it gives us an opportunity to shine the light on that all the more. Okay. Trustee Smith?
Thank you. Okay, third and final item. This is going to be 2C3. So So where C says to support the homework policy, schools should encourage parents/guardians to, this line currently reads, insist the work be completed through the student's own effort. As the parent of a kindergartner, I can assure you that I appreciate the intent of this. It's a little too hard line. So I'm going to read this first, but very open to massaging. What I drafted was, so instead of that, it would now read, expect the student to independently complete as much of the work as possible and direction to the student where reasonable. Because I think even my own 5th grader, he'll be like, can you walk me through this? I can't insist that he do it. And I also believe there's 2, which is encourage/offer advice. I believe that this goes a bit past that. Offering advice is like talking through strategies of getting it done. It's a little bit softer. I appreciate 2. I want to keep 2. But I do believe that we need to evolve it. And I can reread that because I know that was a long sentence.
Would you mind saying it again?
Yes, absolutely.
Just for our own consideration, because we'll all be asked to.
For sure. Expect the student to independently complete as much of the work as possible and provide help and direction to the student where reasonable.
And provide,
Help and direction to the student where reasonable.
Okay, council's rapidly typing that on, and I'll take a look at it.
And I'm open to massaging. This is just my drafting of this.
Is it a motion?
It will be if that's what we do.
But Would you?
That is a motion.
Okay, is there a second to that motion? Then we can dive in. We have a second. Okay, Trustee Manetto. Okay, so we have it on the screen here, Council.
I believe.
Did he capture it, Trustee Smith?
Correct. That's exactly perfect, based on what I said.
So it should be, basically, if we go to the top, to support the homework policy, schools should encourage parents/guardians to expect the student to independently as possible.
Yeah.
We allow the guardian should provide help and direction to the student.
I'm to that friendly amendment, absolutely.
It's friendly. The second, who's the seconder? You okay with that? Seconder, yep. Okay. Trustee Church, you want to weigh in on this?
Sure. I would have never caught it, and I definitely coming from a parent, and I get it, because if the kid said, I'm reading this book and I don't understand these words, or I don't understand the intent, or I don't understand 4 + 4, we want a mentor, parent, brother, sister, to be able to help them. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, we don't want them to cheat and read the book for them, or fill out the thing for them and mm-hmm. write the thing up and the kid signs it. So my only question is how we word that. That's my only question. But
does this wording
let me put that idea out there. Does it for the board? Because I'm still.
It does to me, but that's just so. If not, then you have a recommended change. Friendly, or otherwise. Okay, all right. Trustee Church, unless you have a recommendation?
No, I think I'm good with it.
Okay. All those in favor of the recommended change to Board Policy 6154, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? All right, the motion carries. Record show it is unanimous. Anything else on this policy?
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Nicolette?
Thank you. So, page 2, number 2, B.
New B or old B?
New B.
Mm-hmm.
Pink B. Teacher motion. Policy 6154, homework. Effective mechanism or system to communicate and review assignments. The only addition is the word review.
And review. Okay.
And review.
That goes back to where we take your minute to get around it. And okay.
Yes, you all.
All right. Is there a second to the motion? If you, I know it was 20 minutes ago, but there was the first conversation we started having right after staff presented this, and then Dr. Nicolette wanted to play around a little bit with how she closed that loop, if I can use your words. Right. And then so we said we'll go on to these other comments and come back. And so this is the comeback. Her concern was how do we loop it back to the teacher, and that's her recommendation. So is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, we have I've been over here a lot. I'm going to this side of the table over here. So we'll go to Trustee Mayberry. Okay, discussion. Trustee Church?
Tell me again what that means.
It means that just as the parent has a responsibility, active participant in homework, that if a teacher gives a homework assignment, there'll be follow through in reviewing it. Student knows they did good, they need more work, etc. It's just one word, and I will tell you, I feel a little silly having to add it, but I think it's important.
Okay. Other comments? Do we have an opportunity to see what that looks like up here? Communicate and review. Everyone see it on the screen? Trustee Manetto?
Thank you, Madam President. Question. And review. Now, the teacher's reviewing. Is the teacher reviewing with the student? Or is that
That's a
specific?
site-based decision.
Okay.
I will say this, that I know from being a teacher myself on many levels, that why give homework if I'm not going to provide some kind of review and input? Otherwise, Diane may think, well, I got my homework done, but it's all wrong. So
Okay. Anything further? Okay, so now we have the motion on the floor to insert the words "and review." Okay, no further discussion. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Opposition? All right, the motion carries. That the record show it is unanimous. All right, anything else on this policy? I'm going to go back to just one thing I said earlier, is when we went to policy number, right under policy number 1, this is on page 1, the decision to implement a site-based homework policy is designated to the school principal. That seems like we're overshooting the superintendent in this, and so I'd like to make sure we aren't doing that, because our job is not to direct anything site-based, or to direct anything to principals. Legal? Yeah, please. I'm looking at you like, is it just me being paranoid? I mean, overly sensitive, or?
As you're going through this policy, it seems to me the policy would read better along the lines of policy 1, something along the lines of the board does not mandate homework. However, if homework is assigned, it shall do the following. And then homework should, boom, homework should. All these sentences tell you what homework should do for the Washington County School District.
Mm-hmm.
But you shouldn't, and I'm not going to suggest that you do because we're sitting in a public meeting, but arguably you're in violation of the superintendent's contract because you are directing principals and teachers directly, and you don't have that authority. Now, what you could do is you could move this language, and this should have been caught, and I will take responsibility for that. But this language should be moved to regulations. You can direct the superintendent to adopt a regulation that says the principals have the authority to make site-based decisions related on homework. You can direct the superintendent to adopt a regulation that teachers shall create an more system view homework assignments, but you cannot direct teachers from this dais. That is not what, right. This is an old policy. This is a policy that was written in the past before our office grabbed hold of it, and there's no one to blame. But as I'm sitting here listening to this, the board is way into the weeds, and Trustee Church pointed it out in his discussion when he said, so you're telling me we're saying what the principal should do and the superintendent can't change it? And the answer is yes. That's a problem.
That should have been the red flag right there.
Yeah.
Huh? It's better if somebody else patch you. See?
So what I would suggest that you do is send this back to staff, allow my team to work with staff, in particular me, since I'm the one sitting here, and then we'll come back with something that hopefully meets the board's desire. I don't think this is ready to move forward. It is what it is at this point in time, but I would recommend that you send it back to staff.
So it sounds like then just that really that one little thing that kind of piqued me just kind of was just this much of a bigger problem.
Yeah.
But the thing that has been good is we've worked through those things that we do want, so that as you go back to work with staff and what might be appropriate and so on, that it can still, that at least that staff knows that these were the desires of the board. So we'll look to, we have lights on?
I totally support that. So do I need to make a motion to undo my motion?
No, I think the motions can stay.
Okay.
We don't need a motion to undo your motion. I think the motions can stay because we've made the changes to this, and now we're going to send it as changed. That will be another motion to send it back to staff. Will be the next. Did I get that right?
Then that's exactly what I'll do. Thank you.
Okay. So we're still good right now. The motion just passed. Clerk Manello, then we'll have the superintendent weigh in.
Well, I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay. So superintendent, why don't you weigh in, and then we're looking for the motion to send it back.
Yes, I would suggest that, and I agree with legal counsel, obviously, that, you need to look at a whole bunch of issues here and send it back to staff. Probably request that this not come back, because as you all have seen, our board policy stacked quite deep over the next couple of months. And I also think, similar to some other policies, that I think your new superintendent should have input and weigh in on this policy. So I would suggest that this policy not come forward until your new superintendent has an opportunity to review it as well with the board.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. So Clerk Minetto, so you're making a note for your motion?
Well, sort of.
Sort of. Please.
My only concern, and I respect the superintendent's point of view, my concern with waiting until the new superintendent comes on is you are entering into a contract with this person that says they have the right to manage their staff, and you're managing their staff with this policy.
Until we change it, we're still managing the staff.
And so I'm going to suggest that this actually be fast-tracked, at least to remove that language and have it changed. Or when Mr. Hall negotiates the contract with the superintendent, point out to the superintendent, and this is perfectly legal, that whoever the new person is, that this policy exists, but that the board has full intention on changing this policy, and that they're accepting the position, understanding that. But you need something, because right now you have conflicting language. You manage your staff, but yet we are over here. You got to be really careful about this. And
okay, so what we're thank you, Council and Madam Superintendent. So what we're looking for is one, the motion to send it back for legal review, for starters, so that can be cleaned up, and then the timing. Why don't we do just like we BOT times out everything else on the agenda, so that can be established then, and we can go, and it can be handled one way or the other. So I understand leaving it undone is not good for as we bring a new soup in under a new contract. Okay, so
Can I just say so moved to that? No.
Did you get it, Jeannie?
Yeah, that should send back to staff as amended, but also rewording for legal review.
Just say for legal review. Yep, no rewording. Yeah.
For legal review.
That's it.
And then, do you want to put a timeline?
Nope. I don't think. I think because it can be handled one way or the other. There are a couple of options it can be handled. So, does that? So you're a so move?
So moved.
Okay. Is there a so second? Okay. There's a so second. It's Julia Roberts' Rules of Order. Favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition?
Nay.
All right. The motion carries. At the record show, it is 6-1. Okay. We'll keep pushing, right? We'll keep pushing. All right. So we have some of the same people ahead of us. Okay. All right. Board Policy 2.06, discussion and possible action to recommend revisions and revisions to and/or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy. This is 6160, instructional materials, and it goes on to detail that. And we're just going to go right to Dr. Parks.
And hopefully we'll go real quick. This policy standardizes our adoption and disposal of curriculum materials. There are no content changes, only formatting. This was last updated in 2020. Questions, suggestions, recommendations from the board?
Only if there's something other than formatting changes that you would like to draw to our attention, unless something's jumped out to one of my colleagues here. Okay, all right. Seeing none, then looking for a motion if it's the pleasure of the board to move this forward as submitted by staff. Okay, motion, Trustee Smith, is there a second? Second, Trustee Rodriguez. I'm sorry, any public comment? Let me pause.
There's no public comment.
Okay, thank you, Jeannie. You're always good about waving the card, but I have to make sure. All right, seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Opposition? All right, the motion carries. It is unanimous. We'll go to 2.07. That's the record. Oh, for a policy? All right, discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and or for the proposed revisions of. This is board policy literacy, specifically to update the formatting and so on as listed here. And once again, we'll go to Dr. Parks.
So real quickly, the updates to this are definitions moved to the front. Point out that on the front page, number 3 was added, culturally responsible practices. And then on page 3, we added integrated text standards to make it more clear. Those were the additions, but this was last updated in 2019.
Okay. Any public comment on this, Jeannie?
There's no public comment.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we've heard the recommend. We see the recommended changes before us, and we see the two edits, so to speak, that were added. Dr. Nicolette?
Thank you. I would just make the same recommendation as far as consistency. Begin with the Board of Trustees establishes this process. Just flip it. No word. Board of Trustees this in
to assist in.
Thank you. To assist in the development abilities and communicate and organize, and then primary responsibility of the Washoe County educational programs and literacy and related services for all students to achieve continued academic success.
Mm-hmm. Just a flip-flop.
Just a flip-flop.
So that's a motion, Trustee Nicolette?
Yes.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor that there's a flip-flop here, and primarily for consistency. Is there a second? Seconded by Trustee Rodriguez. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? All right, the motion carries 6-0. Anything else? Literacy. That jumped out the lights on. Yeah. Preliminary approval as changed. Moved by Trustee Rodriguez.
Seconded.
Seconded by Trustee Mayberry. See no discussion? All right, indicate so. Opposition? All right, the motion carries well 6-0. All right, one more again, Dr. Parks, the item 2.08. Actually, we have two more now. Discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and or for the proposed revisions of board policy. This is 6300 mathematics with the same description following updating, formatting, clarifying language, and so on. And I turn this over to you, sir.
So real quick, this was last updated in 2014. In addition to the formatting, we added college and career readiness definition, no substantial content changes, and similar to the literacy, we added the cultural responsible practices and removed I on page 2, that all comprehensive high schools provide at least one section of geometry for almost calculus each year. That was removed as no longer needed in policy.
That's right. Okay, right. That's outside. Trust. Oh wait. Any public comment, Jeannie, on this?
Just a quick question. Thank you, President Taylor. On that II, where it says one math class beyond Algebra 2, I'm wondering about the word beyond. And so Superintendent McNeil and I had a great conversation about this, and we were talking about things like financial literacy and other really great and realistically applicable math classes. So my question is specifically with the word beyond Algebra 2, because beyond seems to imply that it's further along the complexity scale, but I know that the other math classes can be viewed differently than that. So could it just say one other math class. It's just the word beyond Algebra 2, and maybe I'm interpreting that incorrectly, but knowing what the other math classes could be, I'm just curious if the definition would really be beyond Algebra 2, or if an alternative could be and another math class from the course selection or something like that. I apologize, I'm not phrasing it as a specific suggestion because I feel a little bit outside of my sphere of knowledge.
I think I think that's a great suggestion, and I think it would be fine. I think the beyond came as we have this math flow chart that I think I've shown most on means of it, and I think that's probably where it came from. But you're right. We have a financial math class. We have prob stat discrete class. We have a pre-college math class that aren't necessarily more rigorous in terms of beyond the content of Algebra 2. So if you're thinking about that wouldn't be applicable. I think beyond completely means on the arrow chart.
So another word might be your recommendation then?
Yes, so I would probably change that to in one math class from, where am I going with this? So one other math class, it's not one other math class. I need a little bit of help here. Okay. One math class from a suitable course selection. Yes, thank you.
Available courses?
Yes, what she said. Thank you.
Okay, so
you're good at this.
So we're helping Jeannie. She's writing it. So is council. So we have in one math class.
I didn't catch it.
Can we restate? What verbiage are we working on here?
Available courses.
Yeah,
in one math class from available.
From available courses.
From available courses. Okay.
Perfect. That I would make a motion to adopt that.
Okay. You see the language on the screen, everyone. Is there a second? I like that. I'm counting that as a second. All right. Other discussion. That's a great catch because there are other math classes that are really important and really helpful, but they're different. Okay. Seeing none. All those in favor indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? Okay. The motion is carried.
Could I get the second? Who was the second?
That was Dr. Nicolette. Okay. All right. Let the record show it is unanimous.
And I had one other question. Are we able to pull policies back? Like if after a year we wanted to revisit this, is our board able to bring a policy into a future policy committee meetings? I know that the policies are on a cycle, but can we also pull them?
I think that the same. I don't know that we have this in policy, but if two trustees want to bring something, then I think that's the way it would say.
Okay.
Same kind of practice. I think just to be consistent, we've pretty much.
Perfect. I just had that question. I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay. Trustee Church?
To clarify, I believe, I have to read this again, but I believe any trustee can do it for policy.
I think you're right. I know your arm's going to get sore. No, I remember because that came up at a meeting. It came up at a meeting. I believe it did. So it's in policy, but I believe that's what it is. It is in policy. Okay. All right. Moving on. Agenda items. Thank you, ladies. Jenny, next time, Miss Anderson, next time don't say so much.
I know.
Oh, yeah, we do. That's right. We made that change, but we didn't do the policy. Thank you. I was thrown off because Jeff was right. That threw me. All right. Don't leave quite yet. All right. So now we're looking for a motion to approve a board policy 6300 as amended. The motion on the floor by Trustee Rodriguez, second? Seconded by Trustee Manetto. All right, no further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposition? All right, the motion carries. It is unanimous. All right, ladies, thank you so much. Yes, you know. All right, agenda item 2.09. This is discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and or for the proposed revisions of Board Policy 6400. This is on assessment and then the same details following. And then once again, Dr. Troy Parks.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor.
You're joined by a different.
And I am being joined by Dr. Aird, our Director of Assessment, who, again, is the resident expert on this policy. So in 6400, we have updated the formatting, and for consistency, we removed reference to the proficiency exams. They're no longer proficiency exams, and we have added the college and career readiness assessment. and this was last updated in 2014, and we are ready for any questions, recommendations from the board.
Okay, thank you very much. A public comment on this one, Jeannie?
There's no public comment.
Okay, thank you. All right, Dr. Nicolette?
Hello. So on page 3, under policy, it is now A, little I. I wonder if we should not reference Office of School Leadership, and the only reason I'm thinking that is because we're about to have a change in our superintendent, and so we anticipate one, and there might be a reorg, and we don't want to bring back a policy just to change an office title. Just a thought.
Yeah, and Dr. Aird can add to this as well. I believe that the reason that that's in there is because the importance of the supervision. The area superintendents are our Office of School Leadership, and often in their responsibility, they take direct, if you look at their job description, they're responsible for the academic achievement of their schools. So it's a naturally occurring data cycle to be looking at data with Office of School Leadership between accountability and academics, and really looking at how we at central office can support student learning outcomes.
Thank you for that, and that makes sense. And I'm going back to what General Counsel Rombardo mentioned about who we direct, and in this case, it really is the superintendent then who would direct the Office of School Leadership or whatever name it's under. So I think I still feel that we should remove that reference. In fact, I feel so strongly about that, I'm going to make a motion.
Okay, please go ahead.
I move that Board Policy 6400 Assessment, page 3, under Policy, little a, little I, the reference to Office of School Leadership be removed. It would actually be Office of School Leadership Plans be removed. So it would read, encourages analysis of results and assists, in planning for instructional improvement as established by the district plan and best practices, etc.
Strategic plan.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, are you able to get that? You follow her with that, Council? Okay. Okay, yeah, there's a motion on the floor, and I want people to take a look at it. It's on the screen. That's why I wanted to see if you got it. Okay, and then there's a motion. The motion needs a second, or will die for lack thereof. Okay, seconded by Trustee Rodriguez. There's the recommendation, and we heard the rationale behind it. Discussion?
Could I hear from staff again on their opinion?
Sure.
With that change, it changed originally, so you have the district strategic plan, and then it was changed from school performance plans. So each site makes their school performance plans, and we do encourage them to analyze the results of assessments for their performance plans, but the Office of Leadership oversees that. That's what part of why that was put in there. Do we want, I'm just curious because it was taken out, do we want to include school performance plans that the analysis reflect in school performance plans?
Would that, may I? I know that's your question.
Yeah, I actually, what just popped into my head, and be careful here, Jeff, but it actually gets back to what General Counsel Rombardo said. It's up to the strategic plan and the superintendent, not the Office of School Leadership. So taking it out would seem to be a good thing.
Trustee, go ahead.
I don't want my opinion to be misconstrued. What this is this is different than what I said. The previous policy specifically directed principals and teachers to do something. This is not directing anybody to do anything. What it's doing is encouraging the analysis of this data, these results. results, cities, plans, and best practices. So don't confuse the two. The other
Okay.
policies did teachers and principals to do something, and we want the superintendent to do this. So that's two different things. So I just want to be clear on that.
So what I may say, if I may jump in, then it just with a nod to what Dr. Nicolette's concerned, that if the Office of School Leadership is specified, that may change one way or the other. So then it may, so then the recommendation, back to what Dr. Eric was recommending, so then does it go to school performance plans so that there's something else in there where the analysis of this data is occurring? That's it, because it looks like they're looking for some triangulation here, if you will, and we're taking one of them out, and Dr. Eric is saying, oh, this needs to be something else on that other leg. Please, Dr. Eric.
Right. So when we look at this, we start with the district strategic plan. We should use the analysis for that, and then come down to the next level being a site, we call them school performance plans. And then it comes down to teachers and the RTI process. So it starts very big and funnels down. My question was, if we take out Office of School Leadership, do we want to include the school performance plan as that goes from district to school to MTSS and teacher level?
Otherwise,
So
we're missing an important step in the
you're
middle.
missing the
is what
site
you're
level.
saying.
And
Okay.
you actually could include the district improvement plan. So you've got the district improvement plan and schools performance plans as well, too. So for that district aspect, you have the strategic plan, which is actually the board.
The boards.
Right, and then you have the district improvement plan, the DIP. And then you have the school performance plan, the SPPs. So it gives you those levels.
Thank you for this.
No, we have that's what we're now. Yeah.
And to all of that, I want to share that I'm rethinking, because I think we're getting into the weeds again. And I wish that, can I make a friendly on my own motion?
Or you can just withdraw your motion.
I think I want to withdraw the motion, and this is why. I think by naming all those best practices of Tier 1 and the whole thing, trying to triangulate, which that was a great reference, if we just simply have in this policy, encourages analysis of results and assists in planning for instructional improvement, isn't that really what we're trying to do? And it could actually be any multitude of systems and departments and plans. So I'm looking to the experts in front of me.
Well, procedurally, is the motion withdrawn?
She didn't say if the motion was. Is it?
Is it that simple? I can just say.
You can just say I withdraw my motion.
I withdraw my motion.
Okay.
If the second agrees.
Okay, the seconder. Yep. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So the conversation around it then is it should it be more simplified and just say as established by the district strategic plan, or should it have a couple of other steps in there? Right. I'm just from my own personal standpoint, just as one trustee, I'm comfortable with the district strategic plan and then the district improvement plan along with the school improvement plan, and I'm comfortable with that. It takes out the Office of School Leadership, but it shows the pipeline that it should go down. I'm comfortable with that from that piece. Trustee Rodriguez was thinking that. But that's just my 2 cents, because you're asking for people's 2 cents. That's mine. Others?
Wait. Are you making a motion?
No, she asked for. Go ahead.
Well, she asked for 2 cents, but he said, I
would-
So is
I
that agree?
agree with what
No,
you're
he
saying,
didn't
and I
say I
think-
move that. He said I agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. It could be the same thing, but that. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Motion. Okay. Is there a second? Is it on? You have it on the screen?
I don't have it
Yep.
on there. I don't know.
Okay. So this. So it says district strategic plan. I mean, district strategic plan, and then the district improvement plan, and then the school improvement plan.
Would you please provide us with those 3 terms again?
No, it's on the. He's got
You got them? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Performance.
That's it. Yep, he got them.
Or performance.
Performance, school
Sorry.
performance plan.
District performance plan.
Right.
Instead of improvement.
Oh, it's a district performance. I said improvement, my bad.
No, that's all right, I said that.
So the performance plan?
Yeah. So you have a DPP and SPP.
Okay. There.
Can't skip the dip.
Okay, so how you the motion? There's the motion on the floor to make that change. Is there a second? There's a second by Trustee. The motion was by Trustee Rodriguez. The second is by Trustee Manetto. So everyone take a look. Council has it on the screen. And that's what I get for pushing through without a break, right? You probably needed that. I was trying to push. I know. Boot camp. All right, discussion on this. Questions? Okay, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Opposition? All right, the motion carries. Let the record show it is unanimous. That's for this change. Anything else on this policy? Okay, then we're looking for a motion to approve board policy 6400 as revised.
So moved.
Motion on the floor. Is there a second? Seconded. Motion by Dr. Nicolette, seconded by Clerk Manetto. Discussion? All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Opposition? All right, the motion carries. The record show it too is unanimous. All right, there we push through this last policy. Thank you very much, Dr. Iyer and Dr. Parks. All right, because we have a forced 20-minute break in between anyway, so I'm trying not to do a break then a break. All right, agenda item 2.10. This is, I'm drawing my own eyes now. Okay, 2.10, this is discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 9110. These are meeting protocols with all the descriptors as indicated, and I'll turn this over to Chief General Counsel.
Okay, good afternoon, Board. Good afternoon, Board. This is Board Policy 9110. This is meeting protocols. It's a cleanup of a lot of language and some inconsistencies that were in the policy that were holdovers. First, we recommend paragraph 1 be removed. Whether we have that in there or not, we have to comply with the open meeting law, and that's just a provision out of the open meeting law. As you know, our office is making a concerted effort to remove unnecessary language. If we have to follow the law, we have to follow it whether we put it in our policy or not. So I don't know why we would put it in our policies. Which also goes down to Section 1B2, the reason why we're cutting that off as well, because we have to comply with 241. Preparation of agenda and support materials. This just clarifies how that's going to be done. It's more of a language cleanup than anything else to make it read better. The superintendent is the person responsible for the preparation of support material in support of agenda items. And then there is so that's the general rule, and then there's also here's how it works for trustees, and this was an issue that was debated at length in the past, and so we rewrote this to make it clearer. Supplemental information provided by a trustee is not support material. Support material is defined under the open meeting law, NRS 241-020, as material that is provided in support of an agenda item. Unless the trustee is the trustee's agenda item, which is unusual. Normally, agenda items come from staff. Then the trustee doesn't get to provide support material. They get to provide supplemental material. If the trustee requests the item, then they get to provide support material for it, and that's basically what these paragraphs are laying out. In either instance, any material provided by a trustee to the Board of Trustees will be included as a public record. The difference is that support material must be provided to a requester 3 days prior to the agenda item unless the material is produced after the 3 days. And so what happened in the past was you had trustees who wanted to provide support material. They had it, they handed it out to the other trustees, but they never gave it to staff to get to these folks who requested it, and that technically is a violation of the open meeting law. And so that's why we needed to clarify what this looked like, and so that's why we did that. The consent agenda, every public body that I've ever represented in 22 years has always had a consent agenda. They exist for standard business, just like we have it. This language that we added comes straight out of our consent agenda. We did have an inconsistency between our consent agendas for the last, I've been with the district for 6+ years, so for the last 6+ years, whether or not an item was pulled off of the consent agenda was always left to the discretion of the board president or vice president, as it should, because it's their job to manage. And I've never seen it done differently than that. But for whatever reason, we had language in there about debating it and things of that nature. So we cleaned this up to be consistent with how our public notices are done. Just as a little side note, a lot of people call public notices agendas. They're actually not agendas. They're public notices. Agenda is a piece of the public notice, which lays out the different items. So the reason why that's important is the consent agenda is a piece of the public notice, and our public notices have always said it was up to the president or vice president to decide whether or not to remove something from the agenda, the consent agenda, or at least the entire time I've been here. Adding agenda items. A trustee may request that an agenda item be added, but they must use the following process. And this is really language cleanup, as we've done it in the past, and it just was kind of clunky, so we changed it a little bit. The superintendent will attempt to answer the trustee's inquiry before making an agenda item. Oftentimes, as you know, you can go to the superintendent and she can answer your question, and we don't need to have it on the agenda item. However, if that fails, agenda items must be requested to the board president, who at the board president's discretion will either add it or not to the future agenda. If two trustees request the same agenda item to the board president, then the board president and superintendent must add the agenda item to a future board agenda in a timely fashion. And the public should not be allowed to place items on the agenda. There was a little clause here that says, but public requests may be submitted to the board superintendent. At the board's request, an item may be put on an agenda. Well, of course, but then that item becomes that trustee's agenda item, so you don't need that language. So if a member of the public reaches out to you and says, I'd like to see this, you agree with them, that's now your item that you're taking to the board president. So the language was redundant and not needed. Timeline for adding agenda items. I struck all this because this is how the superintendent operates her staff, or his staff, I guess in the future, his, her, his, however you want to do it. But anyway, either way, it's not needed. Again, this is getting into the weeds. And then, so that's why it was deleted. Prior to the posting dates of the agenda, the draft agenda shall be prepared and submitted in a timely manner to the superintendent, board president, board vice president. You know, that's the board's desire to see things up front. They're letting the superintendent know that, so I left that in. Arguably, that's also kind of in the weeds, but nonetheless, or could be a regulation, but nonetheless, it's in there. So it makes it clear that if there is tension between the board and the superintendent has to do these things. So it probably is good to leave it in there. Meeting conduct and order of business. All board meetings shall be scheduled, noticed, and conducted in an orderly manner. The board will function through regular meetings, work sessions, special meetings, and emergency meetings. I left that in there because that's the way it was. Just to be clear, though, there is no difference for open meeting law purposes between a regular meeting, a work session, a special meeting. They are all the same, and you must comply with the open meeting law. An emergency meeting is not the same, and it has special provisions under the open meeting law. So sometimes people get confused, well, this is a work session. It doesn't matter. You have to comply with the open meeting law. If you are doing training, which sometimes we blend that word with work session, that doesn't have to comply with the open meeting law. So just a little reminder there. I know I've lectured you guys on this before, but you can't help but remind. It's just the way it goes. Trustees are expected to attend the board meetings, are permitted to attend via electronic means if necessary. The legislature passed a statute to further reiterate that. I didn't think it was necessary, but whatever. The board shall meet regularly and at least once a month. I actually added that language in because that's specifically out of statute. Arguably, this whole section's not needed, but I felt like it's in there, so we should probably, we need to make it consistent with state law. So that's what we did there. Upon the call of a special meeting of the board, the clerk must provide written notice to all members of the board. It's actually also required by law. The board president or vice president may take items on the agenda out of order, combine two or more agenda items for consideration, remove an item from the agenda, or delay discussion related to an item on the agenda at any time. So we had a little inconsistency with the way we were conducting our meetings in this provision. So this provision was adopted in the legislature, I believe, 3 sessions ago, if I recall correctly. And of course, we started doing it, but we didn't update our policy. It was just before I got here. We didn't update our policy to be consistent with this. So it's kind of one or the other. If you're going to have an item to adopt the agenda, then that's how you adopt the agenda. And if you're going to have that item, then you probably can't take advantage of this great provision by the law, which is that the board president or vice president may do these things in order to manage the meeting. They're inconsistent with each other. So that's why we feel in legal, we don't understand why you wouldn't take advantage of a law like this. And so that's why we put it in there. Meetings are managed by the board president, including time and place of meetings. We're just further clarifying the way it's always been. If the board, both the president and vice president are absent, the clerk manages the meeting, just the way it's always been, just kind of clarifying, or not kind of, just clarifying language. Voting, no action of the board is valid unless approved by a majority of the entire board. I took out the 7 members because you never know if they're going to expand us, and it doesn't matter. It's always 4 votes for you. You're an elected body. The other provisions of the open meeting law don't apply to you. You always need 4 votes to take an action. You can hold a meeting with 4 of you. All 4 of you need to vote for it. You can't have an item pass without a 4-person vote because you're an elected public body. It's the duty of every member of the board who has an opinion on an action item to vote. So the Ethics Commission has opined upon this at length. We had this in here, but then we had all this language afterwards that we've deleted. To be clear, the Ethics Commission has opined over and over and over that it is your job as an elected official to vote on items that you have an opinion on. It is not your job to abstain because you disagree with the vote or because you don't want to take a position. You are elected to take a position, and they feel that that's a violation of the ethics code. That's their opinion. It's not, they get to do that. I'm just telling you what they say. If you take their training, they will say over and over, you are to vote as an elected official. And I know you've taken the training because I had it scheduled for for the school district. Then I know there's been a lot of discussion about this, and Anthony and I both will support you. Actually, I do the main support on this with Anthony's assistance at your independent board council. But the Ethics Commission, the rules regarding to ethics, this policy is called ethics, and then it didn't really have anything in it about ethics. So this comes right out of the statute, and I know earlier I'm now contradicting myself. I said, well, why would we include statutory language when we have to follow the statute? I did decide to put this in here because it's kind of complex, and I think you should know it as a board of trustees. And so this gives you a reference. Always, always, always ask me or your independent board counsel if you have a conflict, but I'm going to sum up all of these big long paragraphs in a couple sentences. It's really quite simple. If you have an interest where you might have an advantage over anybody else in the community or your family member, then you are obligated to disclose, and at that time you are permitted to abstain from voting, but only actually if you get a letter from us, either myself or your independent board counsel explaining that. Otherwise, you are expected, if you do not get a benefit that is greater than somebody else in the community or your family member, You are expected to disclose that conflict to the entire Board of Trustees, which means at the time the agenda begins, and then you are supposed to vote on the item. And so, again, the state of Nevada, if you're elected, you are expected to vote. Finally, and we don't normally do this, but I thought it was necessary because we took out the language before. I try to avoid administrative regulations in the we as legal try to avoid the administrative regulations in the 9000 series because that's how you operate yourselves. However, there are some mechanisms that need to occur here related to you getting your agendas together. JJ needs to post things. We need to collect support materials. We need to mail them out. The superintendent needs to get materials from the offices on time. So in order to make sure you achieve your goals of having properly noticed meetings and proper protocol and support material, we thought it was important to put a regulation together for this one, directing the superintendent to have timelines for submission of agenda items, timelines for submissions of materials, how to make minutes available and things of that nature. So that's why that's in there. Very unusual in the 9000s, but thought it was necessary on this one. So that's it. The Office of General Counsel is looking for approval on this item.
All righty. Thank you so much. I see several lights on. I apologize. I don't know who was first.
Can I make it quick?
Sure.
Bottom line, I have tons of stuff to talk about on this. I think we need to send this back for another meeting unless we intend to go late.
It's really, I'm not sure how. I mean, we're a little bit after 2. What are our options in terms of that? It's an important item. There's no question about that.
If that's a motion to set the item at another time, you need a second, you would need a vote.
Okay, so it's just a motion. So would you like to make a motion to hear this at another, and then people can weigh in whether they want to do it?
I see a lot of lights on, but yeah, I have a lot of stuff. There's also public comment at the end. I make a motion, we continue this to a future meeting.
Well, or we can just have it. So it's really up to, well, there's a motion. Is there a second? Okay, there's not a second, so we'll hear it now. Okay, so why don't we do this then? Thank you for reminding me, I would have forgotten about public comment. Let's go ahead and hear public comment, and then we'll bring it on back over here.
I just have general public comment for the end.
Oh, so no public comment on this item? Okay,
No.
All right, great. All right, so I don't know whose light was on first. I'm sorry. So why don't we just work this way if that's okay? Okay, Trustee Rodriguez?
Thank you, Madam President. Under 5C,
let's everybody, because I have several questions myself. So 5C, okay, got it. It's the end of bottom of page 3, everybody.
We're basically 2 trustees requested that same agenda item. I just kind of want to know more like what's timely matter, or timely fashion. I just kind of wonder what that might look like. Is that, for instance, if Trustee Smith and I want to have something agendized and discussion and stuff, like a month, 2 months, a week.
Well,
just kind of wondering, like,
that's been debated in the past, and it was left. The board could never come up to an answer on what is timely fashion because it depends on how big the agendas are, and so and then I know in practice, President Taylor will reach out to the trustees and say, "Look, I'm not going to be able to get it on. I've looked at the agendas because the superintendent keeps a running." List of items.
Well, we see it on the agenda item request, so.
Right, and so she'll reach out to the 2 trustees and say, you're not getting this until June, whatever. And, but so I guess I kind of lost my train of thought there. The point is timely fashion has never been defined and the board has never been able to agree to it. This has been debated before because it depends on what is in the hopper. I think we would all agree that when COVID hit, a lot of things got pushed back and sat on that list for a long time. It's just the way it went. So that's why it's still there. If you want to create a timeline, you just have to realize you create a timeline and a policy. You got to follow it. And if you don't follow it, you're in violation of your own policies, which creates issues.
If I can add in a little bit on that, I think that the whole idea is you get it on there as soon as you can. I think what dictates that some things are timely, right? So then that kind of moves up, if you will, right? Some things are, as as council said, it's like, man, these agendas are so big, like the superintendent search. You push a lot of stuff back to make room for that kind of thing. So sometimes it's because the agendas are so heavy, and then sometimes it's because the agenda item request is a large one, and it's going to take staff a lot of. That's why it's been hard to nail. It's come up several times since I've been on the board, but those are the reasons why it's been kind of, how do you set a time on it when it's those three things that, even like COVID, which is really unusual, put that aside, but how long does it take for staff to get it together? What's the agenda items look like? And is that something that's timely? Like, we need to do this right away because this is really important.
Right.
So that's just kind of, I wish I had a better answer because.
Yeah, I forgot to mention, there is a lot of staff time that goes into any agenda item, besides the factor, all the support material that's created, research, if it's a big item. I forgot about that.
That's just the way it's been since I've been on the board. But certainly, if there's something that the board would like to consider, I certainly think we should. It's just those are just the considerations that there have always been.
When I was asked to do the rewrite on this, I tried to fashion language, and I couldn't come up with anything that fits because there's always going to be something. So.
Right, I know, like with us, I'm not too worried. I mean, I know that a lot of work goes and stuff, and I mean, we want to see that this afternoon, but just like for future, like.
Yeah, because we want to always all be on the board. So I mean, we're setting board policies for the board. Period. Right. Yeah, and I think we have to have that mindset because we want to always all be sitting here. So that's probably not a great answer, but that's the only response I have for that. So BLT, you can certainly weigh in because although it's up to the president to set some with the superintendent, of course we always have that in conversation with BLT. So if you want to weigh in and say something, if I left something out that might.
I would extend it to say that we do have these discussions, and that's a very good question. I struggle with it too, but what brings me comfort is that as vice president and then with my colleagues, president and clerk, we do discuss these things, and I would contend that we are all reasonable people, and if something is really pressing, it's going to rise to the top. I feel very safe in saying that.
Can I weigh in on that one? Or
no, if it's on this, before we move on, yeah, absolutely.
Trustee Smith, did you want to weigh in on that?
No, hers is on something else.
Okay, again, I have a lot of stuff I'm going to be covering.
We're talking about on this particular issue right here.
On this particular thing, 5C.
Yep.
To me, it's just unacceptable. I concur with the concerns, and here's the problem. We may be reasonable people. This is written in general. There will be changes in the board. It gives far too much authority to the board president and the board leadership team. So let's just say perhaps you have two trustees that feel very strongly on an issue, and some don't care, but the leadership.
But it only takes two. So
yes, and they say, we really, really want this on. Well, we're too busy. We have too many other well, we want it on within 60 days. And the person says, no, we're not going to do it. It creates too much. We're all elected or appointed officials representing our district. In that theory, nobody's more powerful than the other, but where the president runs the meeting, it gives way too much power. And I mean, just imagine that we have another election and you've got some real obstinate people and they pick on the minority and they go, no, we're working on it. Our definition of timely is not your definition. I believe firmly that I understand maybe there ought to be a minimum, like it can't be on next week, maybe no sooner than 30 days, unless all agree, but no later than 60 days. I mean, if I want something on and two trustees say, this is important, I think 60 days is very reasonable. Even if you put it on to the point where you say we have to research it more, but we do that in a public forum. I'm a no on this, absolutely. I think, and I'll make a motion if you want, or other opinion from the trustees, but when two or more, what if you have three and four go, no, we don't want it? You've got three elected or appointed people that want to have their voice heard, and it won't be heard because the other four say no. I'm just absolutely.
Well, it's actually it really comes down to, I mean, it's a conversation that happens at BLT, right? And I think that is part of the reason, as I've been president, that I've included BLT so much is because, as much to the greatest extent possible, I think it's fair for more than one voice to be heard in it. I understand we have open meeting law and so on, so it's ultimately the president's decision. But very few, I mean, I can think of one in the past year and a half that I've just made, just without some input or just some consultation with, or with which generally translates to support of, to kind of minimize some of that. Because it doesn't matter if it's 4 or it doesn't matter if it's 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever who want it. It's just if 2 trustees want it on the agenda, then it's going to get on the agenda. It doesn't matter what the rest of that number is, quite honestly. But I just, somebody's got to make the decision on it. I mean, I don't see how you take that away, regardless of what side of any kind of issue. I understand it's a frustration, certainly, because it may be you get somebody who's in this position who's a jerk and says, I don't want anything on the agenda that I don't agree with, so to speak. I mean, which hopefully would never happen, but, you know, people are people, right? Then, yeah, you can kind of end up in a really bad situation. So I don't know if there's a way to guard against that, but I just think that hard and fast it's got to be 60 days. In the middle of that 60 days, COVID comes up. It's not going to be 60 days. I mean, so it's difficult. I mean, I'm sensitive to the whole thing, and love for us to find a great place for it. But a hard and fast, it's just difficult. That's my 2 cents. Trustee Rodriguez, Trustee Minetto, I think I saw your light as well.
I mean, even say 4 months. I mean, that's
that's a long time.
Yeah. I mean, kind of leaves that room to something comes up or something like that. But I mean, and I mean that's pretty far out. I mean, within 4 months, would that be? Is that fairly reasonable? I mean,
it's really up to whatever the board wants to. Yeah. I am absolutely not opposed to landing in a reasonable place. So we got 4 months, Trustee Minello, and then Trustee Mayberry.
I'm kind of in favor of the timely fashion because, as the BLT, it's not like we don't sit there prioritizing. We go, okay, let's look at these and see. I don't feel like we do that. I feel like and sometimes you have to. But I think timely fashion is very vague, and yet it's going to be on there. I mean, I had something that it took a year, and then it finally came on. It was really exciting, but it because there was lots going on, right, as there always is.
Yeah. I mean, this is a good conversation to have. It really is. Trustee Mayberry?
Yeah, I'll just chime in. I mean, I would sort of concur with my colleagues on this side of the aisle. 90 days. I'm throwing out 90 days. I think 90 days is probably a good balance. And then maybe with language in there that says something effective. 90 days or, I'm trying to provide some wiggle room because if the trustees that request this, maybe there's a desire for them to maybe hold off on it for a little while longer. 90 days, I'm struggling with the language, but I do think a timely mechanism would be helpful.
Okay. Dr. Nicolette?
I think there are some nuances that really do kind of twist this whole thing, and I think it's really important to recognize that a lot goes into compiling anything that goes on the agenda. I mean, as we see, the department employees spend a lot of time, but I remember a little situation that came up. It's very small, but this is one of those nuances. A former trustee who moved, and so we appointed another person for their spot, had something on the agenda, wanted something agendized. Well, we took that off because they moved. And so there are so many mitigating circumstances that I'm for not putting a definitive date.
Thank you, Trustee Nicolette. I see all kinds of lights. And I'm going to ask people to not repeat yourself if you've already said something. If you've already said, don't say the same thing because we got that. We have to try to get to our meeting at some point. So I'll weigh in on you. We go to use Madam Superintendent to weigh in.
Thank you very much, President Taylor. I think you really have to take a look at the detail of the particular agenda item, and there are so many differences between agenda items. Some request is very small, and staff can do that within 1 to 2 meetings, and some agenda items, one of which you're hearing today, is going to take months to prepare. And instead of having the staff come up and say, we're not ready to prepare, which is basically doesn't really do anything for the board, I think the verbiage of timely protects you as a board, and it also protects the superintendent and the staff as well, too.
One thing that may be of interest, and I see you have a new thought on this, Trustee Church, right? That something that may be of interest is if we find a place to land that that creates. Because I hear a desire for some. Maybe we need some kind of a parameter. God bless you, but also just having been probably because I have just as much of a lens. I've been in this chair just as long as I've not been when I'm on the board, so I get both sides of it, right? But where is that? So if it were, let's just say if it were a 90 days, there should be I would say there should be a something in there, because that may not have. For an example, there may be someone may ask for an agenda item, but based upon the summative reports, that some information related to that is going to come up in the meeting in 5 months, and it's related to that item. So it doesn't make sense to do it here and then do it in 5 months. And so in that case is when I've called the trustee, hey, look, this is coming up then, it's going to be done then, because staff is already reporting on some of this, because that's their scheduled piece. So that's when it would be outside of a 3 months. So if there is I'm saying out, that sounds bad, but there's something else that's mitigating, or staff needs more time because we don't have enough bus drivers and everybody's out there at the bus hubs, or right, or whatever, so that there's still something so that we aren't operating outside of our policy, because that's what we don't want to do as well. And I don't want to drag staff in here and then staff gets up and says, oh, we're not ready. That's not good for anybody. But that piece, I also don't want to. So that's in my mind. It's like okay, I hear, right? But where's that place? That's still where I'm at. Trustee Church, you
Yeah, the request by 2 trustees, and by the way, I want to cover that later, but that's not what we're talking about now. The request by 2 trustees is made outside of an open meeting. It's not made at the open meeting necessarily. It's just they get together and they submit it, and there's nothing stopping the board president or anybody from saying, hey, we're going to hear that later. Would you reconsider it? My point that I want to make, too, is that 2 trustees make the request. That just goes on the agenda. But if 2 trustees say within 90 days, and I agree 100%, that's a great number, then it has to be put on the agenda. And if they say, no, we don't want it taken off, it doesn't get taken off. So, again, the trustees could just say, we want it on the agenda. And they're happy with meeting 120 days, or they're happy taking it off if they can be convinced it doesn't need to be there. But I like the fact that if 2 say, yep, we want it in 90 days, even if we have to come and say, well, we're not prepared, or we're working on it at an open meeting, at least it gets the light of day. So
okay, I appreciate that. Thanks, Trustee Church. Trustee Smith?
Thank you, President Taylor, and I appreciate this conversation very much. My hesitancy with defining it is, in Trustee Church is right. If we did do it and then those 2 trustees said, no, I don't care what the mitigating factors are, I want that item, that's our board policy, we have to follow that. So I very much appreciate the interest in it being time-bound, because that's what we all know with our SMART goals, among other things. I am going to say that I am just going to trust and respect the process, and so I am comfortable with moving forward with timely fashion. Trusting the process in that.
Thank you, Trustee Smith.
In case anybody's, just to be clear, because I'm not sure it is that way right now. You understand? Everyone understands that. Okay.
Okay. Other comments on this?
I'll make a motion.
Okay. Well, you can make a motion if you'd like to.
Yep.
Yeah.
And again, this is very specific. There's still a lot of other things.
Wait, this is just on this.
On 5C, at the end, I make a motion to amend it to say, after the term timely fashion, and 2 or more trustees may request, let me try and get this right, that the item be included on the agenda no later than 90 days after the request is made, and it must be honored.
You don't have to say it must be honored, because it's in policy. Policy has to be honored. So if you would, can you read that from the beginning, Trustee Church, so we can follow you?
Sure, I'll try.
No, start from C. If 2 trustees,
if 2 trustees request the same agenda item to the board to board president. Seems
To-
like we left out
should
the
be
word.
to the board president.
president, the board president, and superintendent. Again, maybe there's some wording we can talk about there, but we're not even there yet. Must add the agenda item to a future board agenda in a timely fashion, and if the trustees so request, it must be included in the agenda no later than 90 days after the request is made.
Okay, council's getting that so we can see what it looks like on the screen. Okay, there's there's no second on it, so there's no, it needs to be a second before we can even have a friendly. So if there's no second, then we just continue having the conversation. There's no second as of yet, so continue the conversation. Go ahead.
I mean, I'm not too opposed to this, but I would
No, that means that means there's no more motion.
Oh.
That's what that means. So, but you can start another. You can pick it up.
Right, and I would.
No, there's no second. There's no second. But I think he still wants to work on.
If
There's no second.
Can I suggest like adding some language to this, or?
You can build on it, but there's no second to that
all right,
motion.
I would suggest that having an exception, like if it's a particularly large item, like I want to. If it's a really large item, just kind of leave that. Hey, you can have an extension, or if it allows staff to, so we're not wasting staff and board's time to. Leave an extension, basically. Leave it open to, hey, I'm going to need another 90 days. Can
You have to give me some verbiage
Yeah,
that you might want to do with this. Okay, while you think about it, are there other comments on this? Because I'll have something else to. Trustee Mayberry?
Well, I know I brought up 90 days, and I do appreciate where you're coming from, and Trustee Rodriguez, but, just after listening to some of the dialogue, I don't want to hamstring staff. I don't want to make a hard 90 days. That's the trepidation I have, because you're right. I mean, some of these items are going to require several months, a lot of time and resources. So, how do you measure that? Where's the balance? But conversely, if there's an item that can be put out, in a couple of weeks, and I've seen it too, it seems like sometimes it does take a little bit longer than it needs to. So, going back to what the general counsel said, if you're struggling with the right language, I am too. So I don't know where the balance is, other than I'm thinking of the word encourage, encourage no later than 90 days, but I'm sort of, I'm at a brick wall, Madam President.
Okay, that's a tough spot. Dr. Nicolette?
Yes, thank you. Madam President, I need a clarification. Trustee Church made a motion. Was there a call for a second?
There was not, yeah.
So it has not been seconded, so that
motion is off the table.
That is off the table. Okay, thank you very much. New discussion.
New discussion, and then Joe asked that the new discussion starts there, so I asked council to leave that on the screen. Okay, the only recommendation I could add is if it would be to a future board agenda item in a timely fashion, and ideally that's within 90 days. I would say something. That's the only thing I can think of that would not hamstring, because I'm just not I'm not comfortable dragging staff in. Well, we're not. I'm not comfortable with. We don't care if we have a bus strike going. We don't have a strike, but you know what I mean. We don't care if COVID. We don't. I'm just not comfortable with that.
Right.
I'll make that motion.
Yes, please. That motion's done.
Do I do?
Just I haven't lost you. Hang on. No, keep your mic on. I'm coming back. I'm just letting council catch up. Okay. All right. So go. I don't mean go like go, but you know what I mean. Go. Jump in.
I can't see what you put.
What I said, if this is where you're at, Trustee Church, in a timely fashion, ideally that's within 90 days.
Ideally within 90. Do you want that? Is that a motion?
You said you wanted to make the motion.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yes, you can just say so moved.
What she said.
Yeah, just say
so moved.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor that ideally within 90 days is added to that. Okay, is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, second to the motion. Okay, any discussion on the ideally 90 days?
Yes, thank you, President Taylor. I feel like I need to hear from Superintendent McNeil on this, because to Trustee Mayberry's point, I appreciate that he brought up the 90 days and then that kind of got some traction. I have a pretty good idea of how much work goes into this. And if we think about all the things that we could agendize, especially now that we're coming out of COVID, I am really concerned about the unintended consequences. I know that it's softened with the ideally, but I would like to hear from the superintendent if this is even remotely possible, or will it just feel like a failure cycle inadvertently when we would never want to put our
Unintended
staff in that
consequences.
situation. So if you may.
Absolutely. Madam Superintendent?
Thank you very much,
I don't know, I know I don't need to say this, but be honest.
Yeah, you don't really need to say that. Thank you for that. I just go back to what Chief Counsel Rombardo says and the definition of timely. And I think, your superintendent and staff understand what that term means as far as they're going to do their very best to get that agenda item. But life happens, right? And good things can happen and bad things can happen. And I think this pens the board, and I think it pens the superintendent up against, a timeline. So I think you ought to just stick with timely fashion. And then it's a conversation that if that doesn't happen, then that's a conversation with the superintendent, right? We've had 6 agenda item requests. I'm just hypothesizing. We've had 6 agenda item requests, and they're within 6 months. We've got to do better. That's part of your evaluation, of your CEO.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Okay, thank you, Madam Superintendent. Dr. Nicolette?
I agree.
Okay. So there is a motion on the floor. There is a second. Any more discussion on the motion? The motion is to add ideally 90 days. Okay. All those in favor, please indicate so. Oh, yes.
Just for further discussion, I mean, I'm also trying to think forecasting, 4, 6, 8 years down the line, new trustees, new superintendent. We won't always have, an outstanding president or BOT. So that's just something I am considering to try and protect trustees as well in the future.
Okay. Thank you, Trustee Rodriguez. Okay, call for the question. All those in favor of the motion, which is to add ideally within 90 days, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? No. Okay. I heard. Were you a no or aye? No. Okay. So I heard 4 no's. So, okay. So the motion actually the motion fails. I'm also a no. It's 4 to 3. Okay, 3 to 4 actually, because it failed. 3 to 4. No, 2 to 5. 2 to 5. 2 to 5. I went math the wrong way. 2 to 5. Okay. It still failed no matter what, but let's get the numbers right. 2 to 5. All right, let's get back to that math policy we just passed. Okay. Okay, so that was, Trustee Smith.
Thank you. The item that I would like to ask a question is, let me refine my place. It was the consent agenda. So 3. I was wondering here, I know that we had been following on the consent agenda items that if an item had already been on the consent agenda item, then it required 2 trustees to pull it, which I support, by the way, but I don't see that written here. So is that because the board leadership team decided to back away from that? Because I actually do think there's a lot of logic in that exclusively for consent agenda items that are coming back for a second time.
If I may, that was actually on one of my comments as well. What it was as indicated in the policy, the board president has the discretion to either allow something to be pulled or not. Typically, whenever someone asks, I would do it unless it had been already been deliberated. And so that was never written explicitly in there. I did that because that's part of my discretion as the board president. I had the same questions like, do we want to put that in policy? That was on my note as well. So if it has already been deliberated by the board, then it takes 2 trustees to pull it so that it can be deliberated again.
I would like to add that because I feel particularly when we were in that situation, although I do recognize it is within your discretion or any board president's discretion, I do think that that's a reasonable policy change and it should be memorialized with a policy change to go with it. So I'm going to apologize to Chief General Counsel Rombardo because I don't have this written out right now because I wanted to ask why it wasn't there. But I would like
I'm going to ask you
here.
that if you would like to make that, I'm going to say, want to put that,
I'm fine with
that
that.
motion?
I would like to make a motion that if a consent agenda item has already been heard once, then it requires 2 trustees to pull it from the consent agenda item for review.
I'm sorry, I was being asked for. Oh, yeah, no, I don't have that with me. I'm sorry, will you please say that again? Council was asking for a cut.
Sure. Yes, I would like to make a motion
Can you
that
say, well, is it so a consent agenda A, B, C? Where would you like it to be added?
I'm going to defer to Chief General Counsel where it should be, maybe under B, it may be a continuation of B, that 3B, that if a consent agenda item has already been heard once before the board, then deliberated once before the board, then it requires 2 trustees to request for it to be pulled for consideration at that subsequent hearing.
Mm-hmm. So there's a motion on the floor, and I'm going to restate it as council's catching up, that the recommendation that there be a 3C, that if an item has already been, if a consent agenda item has already been deliberated by the board, that it will take 2 trustees to remove it for further deliberation. Did I say that right? Okay.
Then it will take 2 trustees.
Yeah, two trustees. Two trustees need to. 2 trustees are required for a consent agenda item to be pulled for continued or for additional deliberation. I'm sorry, I forgot how to say
Correct.
it.
Although I would be very open to Mr. Rombardo's wordsmithing of that. Or like 2 trustees are required for the request, or however it is that we want to put that. But yes,
for an item to be pulled
for consideration, for additional deliberation.
For additional deliberation.
Correct.
For additional, is that the verbiage you want? And then we'll look for a second if that is
correct. That looks right.
Okay, we have a second from Trustee Manello. It's there on the screen now. Discussion on that item.
Mm-hmm.
This is just for consent, for the consent agenda. Trustee Church?
Yes, strictly, and by the way, I do want to go back to putting in the word "the" and everything on the other one.
Oh, the word "the," that's editorial.
Well, anyway, I have other comments on that.
Remember I said we're working our way around.
Yeah,
working our way around.
We jumped back. So anyway, on this one, first of all, my concern is I'm opposed. Second of all, can it be incorporated into number B? Because number B states, and I don't necessarily agree, that the president or vice president can just say, no, we're not going to hear it again. So we don't, is it redundant or somehow incorporated, it can be incorporated into that? And then the procedural question I have, essentially what that is it's calling for a vote, wouldn't it be? Or just any 2 can say no.
Yeah, let me go and try to work my way through that. Yeah. It's different than B. B is on consent agenda items, period, not those that have already been deliberated. The recommendation for C is specific to those that have already been deliberated. So that's why they're enumerated differently. You see the difference? What B, any consent agenda item at all, right? That doesn't speak to whether or not it should even be on there, but that's just to clarify the difference between the 2. Okay, C is if we've already deliberated against this thing, and then it's coming back, we don't need to deliberate again unless 2 trustees want to, and then it's open and let's chat about it. That's what that difference is. Okay, did that answer that question? Yeah. Okay. Other discussion on that? Okay, seeing none, everybody clear on the motion? You see it's drafted there on the screen. Okay, this is for consent agenda items that have already been deliberated by the board. Okay. All those in favor of the motion as demonstrated, as illustrated on the board, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition? Okay, the motion is carried. It is 6-0 because one is out. Okay, did you have anything else, Trustee Smith? Okay, Trustee Church, it is your turn.
All right, there's a lot of stuff to cover, but why don't we go back to, let me pull it up.
Give us a number, sir, just so we can follow.
5C.
Oh, 5C. I was on 2.
Yeah, back to that.
5C.
So number 1.
Oh, or agenda item request.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
number one, whether it's editorial or not, put in the word "the board president." I'd like to address the issue of 2 or more trustees request the same agenda item. I think that's important because you want yourself on there sometimes as a sponsorship so people know. And if 2 trustees do it and you go, wait, I want to be on there too. No, you can't. We've already got 2. And then people go, oh, he or she wasn't in favor of that. They didn't put their name on that one. And that way too, this is important because, so let's say 3 trustees say we want to, hear about having pet dogs in the classroom, and one of them changes their mind. That keeps it on there without having to go back again, and another trustee goes, yeah, I want it on there. So I would like to say 2 or more trustees.
Okay, we're going to pause there because we're going to take one at a time. Trustee Smith?
Thank you, President Taylor. So I hear you with that. I would be very interested in Mr. Rombardo's opinion here. But all this does is just put it on the agenda. And so I think it could be overkill if all of a sudden it's like the equivalent of all these like amicus briefs. And it could possibly look like signaling, because then what if all 7 trustees want this on? It could very much feel like we're already pre-deciding something. And so I definitely hear you, but I have a sincere hesitation about what this could turn into. So again, I'm going to go to unintended consequences and say that I feel that the policy as it's written is simply to just put it on the agenda. So
I'm going to weigh in just because we've had this conversation before. It can be perceived as polling, basically what you're saying. So now 3 want it, now 4 want it, now 5 want it, now it's already been approved, and it's out. It's in writing because it's an agenda. I got that was a legal opinion I got when you asked me about it the first time. If you'd like to hear it directly from him,
yeah,
certainly, because you know me, I'm just going to make it up.
Yeah, the reason why 2 is picked because it's as far away from a quorum or a vote as possible, but still more than one person, right? So as soon as you get 2 or more, you are venturing into taking action, and you obviously shouldn't be doing that, and any action that should be taken should be done here. And with regard to saying I want to support something, you're not supposed to show your support before you get here. You're supposed to show your support when you're here. That's why you vote here. That's why you deliberate here. That's why you consider items here. And so I think you're exposing yourselves to significant open meeting law challenges by adding in more language. 4 trustees going to the board president saying we want this on the agenda is an open meeting law violation. You have voted. So.
See, that's like we talked about this already. So anyway.
And again, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. This is following these are your questions.
Again, you're supporting the discussion of an item, not that's black and white and that's how it's going to be. And again, maybe 2 or 3 trustees, but again, if one pulls out, that leaves essentially a backup trustee that the item doesn't go back to the drawing board.
So is there anything else on this particular? Do you want to comment on this item? Okay, are you going to make that in terms of a motion, Trustee Church?
Not unless there's other discussion in favor of it.
I don't think we see any. So, on to your next item. You said you have several questions. No, go ahead. No.
I'm done with that.
On 5C. Is this on 5C?
No.
Okay. No, we're going with your questions. You said you have several questions on the policy.
Yeah, other than you said the word "thou" will be added automatically. So I'm done with 5C.
Okay. No, we're not on 5C. We're on the policy. Questions you have about the policy.
Okay. Let me speak in general terms, and then I'll bring it back to what I believe is 5B. Again, my fear, and let's speak frankly, we've got an election coming up, and there's a lot of divisive opinions out there, and I think that every trustee, elected or appointed, is valued, and I think it just creates too much authority for the board president or the vice president, which I want to get back to that, to put a roadblock in that. And again, saying for example, but this permeates the entire policy, that the board president has the discretion to say no, you can't have a consent agenda. The board president has the thing to say no, you can't add something. And then specifically on B, it just seems redundant. It's almost like B is not needed because there's either two trustees or they're not, and the board president is a trustee. So if I say, Madam President, I want an agenda item, and you say yes, you're the second trustee, that seems to be included in C, and we could just eliminate B, unless I'm missing something.
Okay, is that a motion?
But for discussion.
Oh, okay. Trustee Rodriguez?
I don't know if I can bridge this to discussion, but I just kind of want to note that we are running an hour over, and we do have a board meeting, and I would love to have further discussion on this on a future policy meeting on May 17th. And I also know we do have a technology update that's going to take about 20 minutes. I just kind of want to see if we can move this towards May 17th for further discussion.
Well, there was a motion that we hold this that Trustee Church made early on, and there was no second to it. So perhaps let's just be pointed and push our way through this, because our policy agendas are really packed anyway from here on out. So is there any feedback on Trustee Church's comment on removing 5B?
Make a motion.
I don't think they're okay. Go right ahead.
And again, my point is, if I'm missing something and it's not redundant, I make a motion that 5C be removed.
5B?
5B, as in Baker, be removed, and then 5C would become 5B.
Okay, is there a second to the motion? I don't think there's a certain. I actually, this you had an opportunity to review this. You want to weigh in on this, Council?
On B?
Yeah, we haven't had a second, but we'll leave that open. There's some light you can shed.
Well, the light is simple. One trustee can go to the board president, and so this is saying if you want to be by yourself and go ask the board president, you can do that. And the discretion rests with the board president whether or not it gets on the agenda. Then if you have two members, there's no discretion. That's why it's necessary. It allows it. These are steps. Step one is the trustee inquires of the superintendent. Here's my issue. Can the superintendent solve it for me? Nope, I still don't feel like the superintendent has. Let me go to the president. Nope, the president doesn't put it on the agenda. Let me go to the vice president, the clerk, or another trustee. They agree. Now we'll go to the president. These are steps. So it's. I feel it's necessary. I wouldn't have wrote it if I didn't think it was necessary.
So we didn't have you went in to have be a second.
Yeah, just real quick. Yeah, I know. I appreciate where Trustee Church is coming from, but I don't think this is really anything unusual. It's not a departure from, say, what a county commission does, or a lot of these elected bodies where they have a chair or a president. So I think in best practices, that's fairly consistent, is it not?
This is the process that we. In my past, I've used this at Carson City. I've used this with state agencies at the Attorney General's office. This is how I think almost every public body does it, because you have to have a mechanism. So.
I would thank you. I would say that I would just say this, and I know you have other things on that you want to cover on this, Trustee Church. Is I look at this in terms of not hey, the president gets to do this or that, because I'm not always the president, right? So it's not that lens, but it's hey, there's a mechanism that if we want to say, hey, we want something else other than what the president says, it's just two of us can do that. To me, I think the two trustees it's not the hey, let's make it so the president can't run the meeting. It's hey, if we have a president who's going rogue, right? We got two trustees that can say, hey, we do want this on the agenda. Or two trustees that can say, yeah, you know what? We do want to talk about this from the consent agenda. Or two trustees so any two trustees can hold the president's actions in check. To me, I look at it that way, and I think that's very important. Then it's not one trustee against one trustee. It's not I like you, I don't like you, or you like me, I don't. It's not that. It's any two trustees can say, hey, we're going to make sure this thing happens and move forward. And I think that's as important. As the president, I'd much rather have that, because then it's not just me. I might mess up. I might have a bad day. Diane might be on my nerves, and I say no. Right? It holds me in check for that. I think I see it the complete other way. And when there aren't two trustees, let's put two in there, so we can make sure that's the case, which is what your recommendation was earlier, Trustee Smith. So anyway, Trustee Church, go ahead, sir.
Okay. I know we want to get through this, but I do have a lot. I'm trying to sum it up. The last portion where the page 7A, where the superintendent makes regulations, just a little concerned that this is our board meeting. This isn't a normal policy where we tell the superintendent.
7A doesn't say anything about regulations. You have the
8A.
Oh, 8. I'm sorry. I thought you
7, 8A.
Oh, page 7.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry.
The
It's okay.
A is,
Got you.
the 8 is on page 6.
I got you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm
The
just,
top of page 7, everybody.
yeah, again, I'm
Yes.
sorry.
It's okay. We got you.
The regulations, those are ones we would need to see. I mean, obviously it's telling the board how we're going to do things and submit things. So I just want to bring up, among other things, that it seems a little unusual. I see the great rationale, but you follow what I'm saying? The board, the superintendent's going to make regulations that tell us how we run our meeting in a little bit, and it's defined in there, but wouldn't that be subject to board approval or something like that? And then I can move on to the next.
Comments? I think there are things that are due to staff. And so they have to have some deadlines around when staff gets materials and so on. I looked at that as here's our guidelines. So we can't run up on Monday at 4:30 and say, hey, let's put this in the board pack. Or that's the way I looked at that. Not as the superintendent is directing us, but there's some guidelines so that staff can operate.
This is actually the superintendent directing staff in these regulations.
So that's my comment because you wanted comments. There may be others. Okay, seeing none, please go ahead, sir.
I'll move back. Now let's go back to consent agenda B about the president, whether things can be removed. And we're talking about ones that have not been heard before. So let me find that on my computer.
It's 3. It's at the bottom of page 2, consent agenda.
Yes. So if I understand this right, and help me out on this, a trustee says, I want to remove item 2.1 from the consent agenda, and the board president or vice president, and I think there's a typo in the sense of the board president says no, vice president says yeah, or the board president says no, we're going, I'm not going to remove it. The vice president says yes, I'm going to remove it. Is that the intended portion of that, or should it say in the absence of the president, the meeting manager? That's just one little part of that. But it says retains discretion whether the item will be considered separately. So you're taking away the authority of any trustee, again, not you personally, but any future president having dictatorial powers over that other elected or appointed trustee to say, no, we're not going to pull that because I'm the board president and I say no. And then what's not covered in here, what if 2 trustees? What if 3 trustees? What if 4 trustees ask and you say no? At a bare minimum, as we've done in the past, I think, I could be wrong, it should be up for like a vote. We have a motion to take it off. Is there a second? Yes, there's a second, and then there's a vote. Do you follow me on that, and any discussion?
Well, there always can be a vote on whether or not to take an item off the agenda. What this says is a trustee may request that an item, singular, not a majority. If a majority wants to take it off the consent agenda item, then they can make an action to do that and vote, and it's off the agenda. There's nothing the president can do about that. In this language, the board president or vice president, I guess we could, it's like blowing up an anthill with a nuclear bomb, but I guess we can make it clear that it's whoever is the chair, but that comes out of our agenda, and it's the board president when they're the chair or the vice president. It's not they get to conflict with each other. It just depends on who's acting as chair. But if we want to put that, we can. But that discretion rests with them. So it rests with the chair, and the reason for that is because consent agenda items are agenda items that are common business placed items, contracts that we have to approve for toilet paper, for example. Still has to come here, but that's not the purpose of the consent agenda. And so this is the request of a single member. If the majority wants something pulled, they can always have it pulled off the consent agenda, and it says that on our agenda, and it's written that way. So this is just a singular request.
Can you show me? You confused me. Where is it? Is it in the policy, or it just comes out on the consent, on the agenda, public notice? Where does it say that there can be a motion and a vote to pull it off?
It's on the public notice, and And even if it weren't on the public notice, the board can take action to do anything that's consistent with the agenda. And that would be consistent with the agenda. You want to have deliberations on it. 3 others want to have deliberations on it. So we're going to take an action to have one item pulled. Otherwise, your result is don't approve the consent agenda because you're not approving it, right? You're not approving item 2.12. Let's just pretend. You're 4 people are opposed to item 2.12. So you would take action to vote on 2.01 to 2.11 and 2.13 to 2.17. I'm making this up. I have no agenda in front of me. Then 2.12 sits there on its own. Well, guess what? It made it its own item. So there's any number of ways to get to that. But we can add language in. It's your policy. So, but if the board wants to add it, let's do it.
Okay, thank you, Council. Trustee Smith?
Thank you, President Taylor. I'm fine with the way that the policy reads in regards to the authority, but I do support changing the board president or the person acting as meeting chair for the purposes of clarification on the off chance that it was the clerk or someone else. So I would support that one change right there. And I can make a motion to do that, yes.
So there's a motion on the floor that really throughout, when it says president or vice president, is president or
the person acting
or
as
meeting manager,
meeting manager,
person
yes.
acting as meeting manager. Okay, he's there, and then there are other places, and that way you can just go.
But
it's
not throughout because some of these rest with the vice president as a member of the leadership
Okay,
team. So
gotcha.
Right. My motion is exclusively
just
for
for this. Okay,
Yes.
so there's a motion on the floor that on agenda on 3. Consent agenda item is 3, and then B, that it's the board president or person acting as the meeting manager.
I put the acting chair. Do you want to
Or
do
acting chair, whatever. I just wanted to use her words. It's whichever. Okay. There's a second.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition? All right. Motion carries. Okay. Trustee Church, I think you have more.
Yes, thank you. Let me go over this one more sec. I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that because we've had approval of the agenda was removed before, and now it's back on the agenda, but for a while, action to adopt the agenda was gone, and again, it creates a little bit of consternation. I wanted this in a policy, so I'm going to make a motion that 3C be added to say any trustee may motion that an item be taken off the consent agenda subject to a second and a vote.
I'm going to say what I think you're saying. You're going back to what council said, that, hey, if the board wants to put it on here, they can. And so you're saying, yeah, I want to put it on here. You want 3C to say again, sir?
I want it in writing.
Well, we already have a 3C. So do you want to add it to this one?
Oh, it must be. That's right. We just added a 3C. Oh, look on the screen.
It's right behind you if it's easier to see.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
So you mean 3D?
3D, yeah.
Okay.
And basically what I'm just saying is, however we word it with the help of legal, that we put it in writing. If one trustee says, I want it off, that we at least get a second. If it gets no second, it dies. And if it does get a second, it gets voted on.
So it looks like it may, it should probably be C and the other one's D because it relates to B.
I'm okay with that under
Right,
B.
it just relates to B. So it's just from a flow standpoint. What you're saying is that any trustee may move that a consent agenda item
be removed.
Be considered separately.
Subject
Period.
to
Period. That's it. You don't need all the rest of
Yeah.
it. You can move it. That's it. Right? That just keeps it clean instead of
Yes.
adding all the extra
We all
stuff.
understand parliamentary procedure.
All right. So there's a motion on the floor from Trustee Church that we move C to D and then add a C that said any trustee can move to make it even more formal that a consent agenda item be considered separately. Is there a second? Because right now it says that it's at the discretion of the president or the meeting manager. Although we can always do that anyway, as pointed out by council, but Trustee Church wants it memorialized. Okay, is there a second? Okay, we got a second. Trustee Rodriguez, discussion? Trustee Mayberry?
No, I was going to second.
Okay. All right, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? No. Okay, the motion carries. It is 5-2. Okay, next, Trustee Church.
Thank you. Basically, I want to get into the opening part, 2.10, where I guess that's under policy. I have to find it again. Where it previously had said Nevada State Legislature has declared, and it's 1, 2, and 3 that have been redacted. As counsel mentioned earlier, it doesn't have to be in there, and then he mentioned later there were some other things that didn't have to be in there, but he felt it was important. I think this is important because it states a message to the community that we do care about openness, transparency. And again, I lost my page, but the Nevada legislature discloses that public bodies exist to conduct the people's business. We shall be prepared, publish an agenda, especially number 1, but I'm open for discussion. I think those should still be in there. I think they do state.
Trustee Church, I'm going to stop you in the middle because I'm trying to move us.
Yep.
So what specifically, you're looking at the former number 1 that was now deleted? Look on the screen, or you may have notes in front of you that might help you.
Yes, so I believe that number 1, policy number 1 should be included.
Okay,
replaced.
So that, all right, is there a motion?
That's a motion.
Okay, is there a second?
Comment?
No, we need a second first, there won't be any
Okay,
comments.
I'll comment. I'll second.
Okay, there's a second. Go ahead, Trustee Mayberry.
No, I was going to say I appreciate legal counsel just trying to streamline it because that's really what we're trying to do. But I mean, if it can stay into, I mean, it's neither here or there for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, we'll call for the question. All those in favor of reinstating number 1 right under policy, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? No. Okay, the motion fails, and sounds like it was.
Can we get a roll call?
4-2.
We don't need a roll call. It looks like it was 4. It's actually it's
5-2.
It's 5-2. I'm like you. I can really go either way, frankly, but it's 5-2. Yep. Okay, Trustee Church. God bless you. Oh, you're coughing.
I think I'm good news. I think I'm almost done.
That's not necessarily good news. I just want to keep us moving.
And 2, preparation of agenda and support materials. And I'll find that exact section, whatever is above that. 2A. Again, I feel like the other trustees, the other 4, are kind of excluded. There ought to be some way where we formally have some input to that. The superintendent with the board president and vice president, those 3 individuals, 2 elected or appointed by the board, well, you know what I'm referring to, 2 actual board members, make the decision for the rest of the board. And I'd like to see some mechanism for having trustees other than 2 or more can put an agenda item and you put it on, but I'd like to see some way to have input, advice, on that part.
So you have a recommendation or you just want some discussion?
For discussion.
I mean, I think if we get together and make decisions, it's called an open meeting. I mean, that's why it's been done in that manner. And to balance that out a little bit, we've included, which is the discretion of the president. To me, we can add the clerk on here because it's really been done as BLT. But you get outside the 3 people, we know it's an open meeting. So that's the challenge with the open meeting law. Trustee Minetto?
Thank you. Now I'm blank. I've lost it. We need leadership. Somebody has to lead, and that's just the way it is. We can't be 7 sheep wandering around. And so we elect our leadership. And if we don't have trust in them next year, then we elect different leadership. And I think in the elections, there's an element of trust. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Clerk Minetto. Trustee Church?
I'm ready to move on.
Okay, next.
And this is, again, I can't find this. Is the adoption of the agenda covered in here? I seem to remember Mr. Rombardo mentioning it, but I can't find it. And again, my point is, it was removed previously for a while. The agenda was not, adoption of the agenda or approval of the agenda was not there. It's been put back essentially on some legal advice, but I'd like to see that in there if it's not in there.
And actually, I don't believe it was this. I don't believe it was this policy. It was a different policy, but it was put back in because it was in the policy. That, I mean, I think that was covered, which is why it was put back in. But certainly, you're going to have to be a little more specific than, hey.
I would like to see it put back in that specifically the public notice and/or the agenda shall be presented for the Board of Trustees for approval. I mean, just put it in black and white. I remember the other one, and the other one was kind of vague because it said, I don't want to try and even try it, but it was vague, and it kind of was like a peripheral issue. I'd like to see in there that the proposed agenda shall be, or the proposed public notice and agenda shall be agendized.
Not the public notice, the agenda.
The agenda shall be, I hate to see, agenda shall be agendized or shall be placed on the agenda subject to the approval of the board. I think that's pretty simple. That's a motion.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? I think it dies for the lack of a second.
All right. And then good news, I'm ready to wrap up. My final comment is what I've almost essentially made before, but I'm going to make it very clear. I'm afraid that, and be careful what you wish for, elections have consequences. Who knows what's going to happen in the election this year, 4 years from now, 2 years from now. I just hate to see policies that allow the minority, and that could be any one of us or anybody in the future, not even born yet, but I hate to see policies that put a bullying effect of majority over minority. And, I think all trustees, generally elected, but elected or appointed, should have some say-so and not be marginalized by the leadership team or the board president, et cetera. So thank you, and that's it.
Was there? Oh, that was the. Oh, I thought you were getting to an agenda thing. I was going to say, okay, all right. All right, thank you, Trustee Church. We've made some changes on this on Board Policy 9110, and so asking if it's the pleasure of the board to move agenda item 91, Board Policy 9110 forward to the full board for preliminary approval. I have a motion by Trustee Smith and seconded by Trustee Rodriguez. Is there further discussion? All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Opposition?
Nay.
Right, the motion carries 6-1. 6-1. Okay, closing items. Do we have closing public comment?
Shannon Coley.
Oh, there she is.
Here she comes.
Welcome, Ms. Coley. Oh, let's get. Wait, your mic's not on, ma'am. Let's get. No, she'll get it. She'll get you. Green. Okay, you're on now. It's on. It just popped on.
Oh, okay.
Magic.
I'm just going to read an email. It has nothing to do with board policies that was sent to me.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I think it has to have. Does it have? The public comments have to have something to do with that. What we have authority over, so it has to be related to board policy. Would you just?
Oh no,
okay.
It's okay. I can read it. I'll be here for the duration,
Oh,
so I'll read it.
If you're okay, if you were going to leave, I would say go ahead.
Yeah,
but
I just thought each policy I would have to speak when you're doing that policy, and
no,
I thought the public comment was.
Yeah, it has to be something. It's like people can't get up here and talk to us about potholes. It's like, what are they going to do about? We don't have any authority over anything. You sure you don't mind waiting? Because if you're going to leave, we'll take it.
Technology.
Okay, all right. Will it still be good? All right, thank you.
Jeff Church.
Again, I wanted to comment on things of Washoe School District relevance, but not board policy, so I guess I'm not.
Yeah, it has to be something that we have authority over that we can act upon.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Do you still want to give
All right. The meeting is adjourned. We need a 20-minute technology break. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. We went over, but if we really don't have, we can't be moving too many things to later meetings, so we're running out of agenda space. So thank you, everybody. We'll see you in 20